Hey guys, tonight we're traveling to Yakutia, officially the Sakha Republic, a place so cold that your spit freezes before it hits the ground, where the temperature regularly plummets to minus 71 degrees Celsius, that's minus 96 degrees Fahrenheit for my American friends, and where the simple act of going to the bathroom outside might genuinely cost you a body part. We're talking about a region in eastern Siberia roughly the size of India, where fewer than 1 million people have decided, for reasons we'll explore, that this frozen hellscape is actually home. You're about to experience what it's like to live in the coldest permanently inhabited place on Earth, where winter darkness lasts for 20 hours a day, and the ground beneath your feet has been frozen solid for hundreds of thousands of years. You probably won't survive this in reality, and honestly, neither would I, but that's why we're doing this from the comfort of your warm bed tonight. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing the global bedtime crew roll in. Are you in Australia where it's morning? California at midnight? Someone always is. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step off the small turboprop plane onto the tarmac of Yakutsk Airport, and the cold hits you like a physical wall. Not a gentle breeze, not a chill, but an actual assault on every exposed millimeter of your skin. Within 3 seconds, the moisture in your nostrils freezes solid, creating a strange crackling sensation with each breath. Your eyelashes begin to accumulate frost. The air itself seems thick, almost syrupy, because at these temperatures the physics of the atmosphere actually changes. You're breathing in air so cold that it's denser than normal, and each inhalation burns your throat like you've swallowed shards of glass. Welcome to January in Yakutsk, the capital city of the Sakha Republic, where you and roughly 350,000 other people have somehow decided to build lives. The thermometer today reads a balmy minus 52 degrees Celsius. I say balmy because it could be worse, much worse. The city holds the distinction of being the coldest major city on Earth, but head a few hundred kilometers north to the village of Oymyakon, and you'll find the coldest permanently inhabited place on the planet, where temperatures have been recorded at minus 71.2 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, which you'll experience later in our story, exposed skin develops frostbite in under 2 minutes. Steel becomes brittle and shatters. Car tires crack and split. And yes, urine freezes midstream if you're foolish enough to try relieving yourself outdoors. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, you need to understand what you're wearing because clothing here isn't fashion, it's engineering. You're bundled in layers that would make an Arctic explorer jealous. Thermal underwear made from merino wool, a thick wool sweater, insulated pants, and over all of that, a heavy coat made from reindeer hide with the fur turned inward. Reindeer fur, you'll learn, is uniquely suited to extreme cold because each hair is hollow, trapping air and creating insulation that no synthetic material has quite managed to replicate. Your boots are called unti, traditional footwear made from reindeer leg skin with the fur on the outside, lined with dried grass that you'll need to replace daily because it absorbs moisture from your feet. On your hands, you wear mittens, never gloves, because keeping your fingers together shares warmth, made from multiple layers including an outer shell of fur. Your face is wrapped in a scarf that covers everything except your eyes, and even those are protected by goggles, because at these temperatures your corneas can literally freeze. Historians still argue whether the indigenous Sakha people, who have inhabited this region for over 1,000 years, developed their distinctive facial features, flatter faces, narrower noses, epicanthic folds, as evolutionary adaptations to extreme cold, but what's not debatable is that they survived here for centuries without Gore-Tex or modern heating. You shuffle toward the terminal, and you notice something odd. Everyone moves slowly, deliberately. No running, no sudden movements. This isn't laziness, it's survival. Rapid movement makes you breathe harder, and breathing harder means more of that frozen air searing your lungs. Exertion also makes you sweat, and sweat in Yakutia is a death sentence. Moisture against your skin will freeze, and that frozen layer will conduct heat away from your body 30 times faster than air. The locals have a saying, sweat and you die. Inside the terminal, which is barely warmer than outside, maybe minus 10 degrees Celsius, you experience your first bout of ice fog. This is what happens when you move from extreme cold into merely cold air. The moisture in your breath and on your clothes instantly crystallizes, creating a personal cloud of ice particles that follows you around. Everyone in the terminal is surrounded by their own glittering fog. It's almost beautiful in a surreal, we shouldn't be alive here sort of way. Your host, a local named Mikhail, greets you with a grin that somehow shows through his frost-covered beard. First time? He asks in accented English. You nod and he laughs, a sound muffled by his scarf. Come. We go to apartment. Then we talk about toilet situation. There's something ominous in the way he says toilet situation, but you're too cold to press for details. The drive into the city center reveals a landscape that looks like a science fiction movie about planetary colonization. Buildings rise from the frozen ground on massive concrete pillars, stilts essentially, that elevate them 2 to 3 meters above the earth. This isn't architectural whimsy, it's necessity. The ground here is permafrost, earth that has been frozen solid for anywhere from 2 years to hundreds of thousands of years, extending down hundreds of meters. In Yakutsk, the permafrost goes down roughly 1,500 meters. That's nearly a mile of frozen earth beneath your feet. If you built directly on this permafrost, the heat from your building would slowly melt it, creating subsidence, instability, and eventual collapse. So every structure stands on stilts, allowing freezing air to circulate underneath and keep the permafrost frozen. The cityscape is a mix of Soviet-era apartment blocks and newer construction, all squatting on their stilts like massive concrete insects. Between the buildings, you see pipes. Massive heating pipes, some a meter in diameter. Running above ground, also on supports, wrapped in insulation and trailing steam into the frozen air. These pipes carry hot water and heat from centralized plants to every building in the city. Burying utilities here is impossible. The permafrost makes it impractical, and besides, pipes need to be accessible for the constant repairs required when metal becomes brittle in extreme cold. Steam rises from these pipes in enormous plumes, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. The city seems to exist inside its own weather system, a fog of ice crystals and steam that glows orange under the streetlights. It's 2 p.m., but the sun, which you can barely see through the atmospheric haze, hangs low on the horizon, providing the weak, slanting light of perpetual twilight. In the depths of winter, Yakutsk gets only about 3 hours of weak sunlight per day. Historians note that this extreme darkness, combined with the isolation and cold, contributed to Yakutia becoming a favored location for Soviet-era gulags, prison labor camps where inmates worked in the nearby gold and diamond mines under conditions that would have made Dante reconsider his descriptions of hell. Mikhail pulls up to an apartment block that looks like every other one you've passed. Concrete, weathered, mounted on stilts, with external staircases. Internal stairwells would waste precious heat. You climb the stairs carefully because the metal handrails can cause frostbite through your gloves if you grip them too long, and you notice something peculiar. There are scorch marks under several of the parked cars below. Fire, Mikhail explains, following your gaze. In winter, we must keep fire under car engine, or we must never turn off engine. Otherwise, oil becomes like, how you say, gel? Car will not start again. This is your introduction to one of Yakutia's many daily challenges, but we'll get to transportation later. Right now, you need to understand where you'll be living and, more urgently, where you'll be relieving yourself when nature calls at 3 a.m. Mikhail's apartment is on the 4th floor, and as you climb, you notice that the internal temperature gradually warms. The stairwell is unheated. It's an airlock, essentially a buffer zone between the outside and the living spaces. By the time you reach his door, it's perhaps -5 degrees Celsius, and when he opens it, a blast of genuinely warm air hits you. Inside, it's a shocking +25 degrees Celsius, a temperature differential of nearly 80 degrees from the outside air. The apartment is small by Western standards, 2 rooms, a kitchen, a bathroom, but it's cozy in that particular way that only Russian apartments seem to achieve, with patterned rugs on the walls, insulation and decoration in one, heavy curtains and mismatched furniture that looks comfortable in its shabby way. But you notice something odd. Despite the warmth, everyone keeps their coats nearby, hanging within arm's reach of the door. You never know, Mikhail says, noticing your glance. Heating goes out. Apartment becomes cold very fast. In 2 hours, maybe -20 inside. Pipes freeze. Big problem. This actually happened during a particularly bad cold snap in 2018, when heating systems failed in several buildings and residents had to be evacuated within hours. Some chose to stay, burning furniture to keep warm, which tells you something about both Yakutian stubbornness and their comfort level with what outsiders would consider catastrophic emergencies. You remove your layers, a process that takes several minutes, and Mikhail offers you tea from a samovar that, you'll learn, stays heated 24 hours a day. The tea is strong, black, and sweet, and it's the first time since landing that you've felt your core temperature begin to stabilize. You're safe now, warm now, and it's time to address the elephant in the room, or rather, the outhouse behind the building. So, Mikhail says, settling into a chair with his own tea. We talk about toilet now. The apartment does have a bathroom, a small, tiled space with a sink, a bathtub, and yes, a functioning toilet. But it's a luxury of relatively recent vintage. The building's plumbing, installed during the Soviet era and maintained through a combination of prayer and duct tape, is temperamental. More importantly, many older buildings and houses in Yakutsk, and certainly anything outside the city center, rely on outhouses. Even here, in this heated apartment, Mikhail explains that during the coldest parts of winter, residents avoid using the toilet too frequently because the pipes, despite being heated, can freeze if water sits in them too long. Better to use little or better to use outhouse, he says with a shrug. Outhouse cannot break. This outhouse logic brings us to the central dilemma of our story. What do you do when it's minus 60 degrees Celsius outside? It's 3 a.m., you've drunk too much tea, and your body is urgently informing you that it needs to void approximately half a liter of liquid that is currently at a comfortable 37 degrees Celsius but will, upon exposure to air, begin freezing in seconds? You hold it. That's what you do. You hold it until morning, or until the pressure becomes genuinely painful, or until you're forced to make a choice between temporary discomfort and potential frostbite in places you really don't want frostbite. Mikhail walks you through the reality. The outhouse, called a sorter in Russian, borrowed from the French, is located behind the building, down the external stairs across 20 meters of open ground. It's a wooden structure, unheated naturally, standing on its own stilts above the permafrost. Inside is a bench with a hole cut in it, beneath which is a pit that, in summer, would smell horrific but in winter is frozen absolutely solid, meaning no smell but also no decomposition. Everything that goes into that pit freezes within seconds and stays frozen until June. The seat itself is wood, which is better than the metal or plastic seats you might find elsewhere, because wood doesn't conduct heat away from your skin quite as efficiently. But better than metal is a low bar when we're talking about bare skin contact at minus 50 degrees Celsius. Locals develop techniques. Some keep a piece of thick felt or fur that they place on the seat. Some, and Mikhail admits this with an embarrassed laugh, simply don't sit, they hover, which requires both courage and impressive thigh strength when your pants are around your ankles and you're trying not to touch anything while also aiming accurately. The young people, they hold it, Mikhail says. They wait until morning, use toilet here in apartment. Or they use bucket. Have bucket in kitchen corner, empty in morning. This, you realize, is not a joke. A bucket in the corner is a legitimate and common solution to the outhouse problem. It's not discussed in polite company, but every household has its strategies, and a designated bucket is one of them. But the real problem isn't just the cold seat or the trek outside. It's what happens to exposed skin and, more critically, to the urine itself. At minus 60 degrees Celsius, the freezing point of urine, which is slightly lower than pure water due to dissolved salts and urea, is exceeded. This means that yes, Virginia, urine can and will freeze. Maybe not instantly, maybe not in a solid stream, but certainly upon contact with surfaces. There are apocryphal stories, and Mikhail insists he's witnessed this, though historians would categorize this as folklore, of streams of urine freezing mid-arc, creating bizarre icicles that then have to be broken off come spring. More realistic and more dangerous is the threat of frostbite. Men have a particular vulnerability here that doesn't require explicit description, but let's just say that exposure of certain anatomical features to minus 60 degrees Celsius air for even 30 seconds can cause tissue damage. Women face different but equally serious risks from prolonged cold exposure to sensitive skin. The medical literature from Yakutian hospitals includes numerous cases of frostbite injuries to areas typically covered by clothing, and bathroom mishaps are a significant cause. This is why, as uncomfortable as it sounds, many residents of Yakutia have trained their bodies to simply not need the bathroom during the coldest nights. They limit fluid intake after 6 p.m. They make a final trip to the outhouse before bed, around 10 p.m., and then they hold it, through sheer will and the body's remarkable ability to adapt, until morning. Your bladder can typically hold about 500 to 600 milliliters comfortably. Push that to the edge of comfort at 800 milliliters, and you can make it through an 8-hour night. It's not pleasant, and it's not recommended by doctors, but it's what people do. The alternative is the bucket, or in some homes, a more sophisticated version. A portable toilet, essentially a chair with a receptacle that can be emptied the next day. These are marketed in Yakutsk stores as night chairs, with the same casualness that Westerners might shop for bedside tables. There's no shame in it here. It's practical. As you settle into your first night in Yakutia, warm in your sleeping bag in Mikhail's spare room, you think you understand the challenge intellectually. But understanding intellectually and experiencing physically are different things. Around 2 a.m., you wake with a pressing urge. The apartment is dark and warm. Outside, you can hear the wind picking up, a sound like a jet engine, but lower, more menacing. The window next to your bed is covered in frost on the inside, intricate fern patterns that glow faintly in the ambient light from the city. You have a choice to make. You can get up, put on your layers, which takes 5 minutes. Go outside, risking exposure. Trek to the outhouse, 20 meters of minus 50 degrees Celsius wind. Do your business, exposing sensitive parts to hostile atmosphere, and trek back, where you can wait, hold it, mind over bladder, make it to morning. You decide to hold it, because you're not yet desperate enough, and because some part of you thinks you can tough this out. This is your first lesson in Yakutian life. The cold doesn't just change what you do. It changes how you think, how you plan, how you negotiate with your own body's needs. You'll learn many more lessons in the hours and days to come, but for now, you squeeze your eyes shut, focus on not thinking about running water, and try to fall back asleep while your bladder gently but insistently reminds you that evolution didn't design humans for this place. Sweet dreams. Morning will come eventually. You make it to morning barely. By 6 a.m., when the first gray hints of light begin filtering through the frost-covered windows, you're in genuine discomfort. Your bladder feels like an overfilled water balloon, and you've spent the last hour doing mental mathematics about capacity versus willpower. The apartment is still warm, but you can hear Mikhail moving around in the kitchen, which means it's socially acceptable to get up and face the day's first major challenge. The indoor toilet is right there, of course, just down the hall. But Mikhail intercepts you before you reach it, coffee cup in hand, looking apologetic. Morning toilet better use outhouse, he says. Pipes are cold from night. First flush of day sometimes causes freeze. Happened to neighbor last week. Pipe burst inside wall, water everywhere. Then freeze. Big repair, very expensive. This is apparently a common enough problem that there's an informal rule. First bathroom activity of the day happens outside, letting the apartment's pipes gradually warm up as the building's heating system reaches full capacity. So you're going outside. No choice now. The pressure in your bladder has become genuinely painful, and you're about to experience what locals simply call the morning run. Though running is exactly what you shouldn't do. Mikhail helps you bundle up, and this time you pay more attention to the process. First, thermal underwear, check. Then wool pants and sweater, check. The reindeer hide coat goes on next, and Mikhail shows you a trick. He tucks a small towel into the front, creating an extra insulation layer over your chest and stomach. Heart needs warmth, he explains. If core gets cold, body pulls blood from fingers, toes, other places. Keep core warm, everything else stays warm longer. The boots, those auntie made from reindeer leg, need fresh grass lining. Mikhail pulls out dried grass from a basket by the door and stuffs it into your boots, showing you how to distribute it evenly. Every day, new grass, he says. Old grass has moisture from yesterday, your feet sweat, always sweat. Wet grass means cold feet. Cold feet means frostbite. This daily ritual of replacing bootgrass is such a part of Yakutian life that kindergartens teach children how to do it properly. There's even a traditional song about it, though Mikhail's singing voice at 6 a.m. leaves much to be desired. Mittens on, thick, fur-lined, with an extra outer shell that's almost comically large. Scarf wrapped around your face, leaving only a small gap for your eyes. Goggles over that. You look ridiculous, feel like the Michelin Man, and can barely move your arms, but Mikhail nods approvingly. Good. Now remember, breathe through scarf, not through nose directly. Walk slow. Do not run. Do not sweat. If you start to sweat, open coat a little, cool down. Sweat is enemy. He opens the apartment door, and you enter the stairwell. That unheated buffer zone that's now around minus 15 degrees Celsius. Cold enough to make you gasp even after just seconds in it. Then the outer door, and you step into the morning darkness of Yakutsk in winter. The cold is immediate and total. It's not creeping or gradual. It's a blanket thrown over you, a physical force pressing against every exposed millimeter. The only part of your skin that's directly exposed is a small area around your eyes, and within seconds you feel the moisture there beginning to freeze. Your eyelashes accumulate frost with each blink. The air you breathe in through the scarf is slightly warmed by passing through the fabric, but it's still cold enough to make your chest ache. The thermometer mounted outside the building reads minus 58 degrees Celsius. This is actually colder than yesterday, and Mikhail explains as you descend the icy stairs that a high-pressure system has settled over the region, bringing clear skies and plummeting temperatures. Clear sky in winter is bad, he says. Clouds hold heat. Clear sky lets all heat escape to space. Can get to minus 65, maybe minus 68 tonight. The walk to the outhouse feels like a polar expedition. 20 meters, perhaps 60 feet for my American listeners, has never seemed so far. The snow beneath your boots squeaks with each step, a distinctive sound that only happens at extreme temperatures. It's caused by the compression of ice crystals that are so cold they've become brittle and sharp. Some scientists describe it as the coldest sound on Earth, and there's something deeply unsettling about it, like walking on broken glass. Your breath creates a cloud of ice fog around your head, limiting visibility to a few feet. The city around you is barely visible in the pre-dawn darkness, just the orange glow of streetlights haloed in ice crystals and the dark shapes of buildings on their stilts. The heating pipes running between buildings release steam that glows eerily, creating an atmosphere that's somewhere between industrial hellscape and alien planet. You reach the outhouse, a wooden structure about the size of a phone booth, weathered gray with a simple hook latch on the door. The wood is covered in thick frost, giving it a fuzzy, white appearance. Mikhail wishes you luck with what sounds like genuine sympathy and waits a polite distance away, stomping his feet to maintain circulation. Opening the door requires effort. The latch is frozen and needs to be hit with your mittened hand several times before it gives. Inside, it's darker than outside, and you need a moment for your eyes to adjust. There's a small amount of light from gaps in the wood, and you can make out the bench, a simple wooden seat with a circular hole cut in the center. Below the hole, invisible in the darkness, is the pit, currently holding approximately 4 months of frozen waste. By June, when things thaw, this pit will need to be emptied. A job that pays well precisely because nobody wants to do it, and we won't dwell on the details because you're trying to sleep, not have nightmares. The interior temperature of the outhouse is perhaps slightly warmer than outside. Maybe minus 50 degrees Celsius instead of minus 58 degrees Celsius, thanks to the minimal shelter from wind. This is not a meaningful improvement. You can see your breath, or rather, you can see it freeze instantly into a cloud of ice crystals that drifts lazily in the confined space. Now comes the moment of truth. You need to lower your pants, expose skin, and make contact with that wooden seat, all while moving quickly enough to avoid prolonged exposure but carefully enough not to risk catastrophic aiming failures. This is where Yakutian children learn life skills that no Western education system teaches. How to efficiently disrobe in extreme cold, how to hover if hovering is your preferred strategy, how to mentally prepare for the shock of cold wood against warm skin. Let's be clear about the physics here. Human skin temperature is around 33 degrees Celsius. The wooden seat is minus 50 degrees Celsius. That's an 83-degree temperature differential. When your skin makes contact, heat transfers rapidly from your body to the wood. This doesn't just feel cold, it feels burning, an intense pain that your brain interprets as heat damage because the nerve signals are identical. Historians studying polar exploration note that frostbite and burns were often confused by early explorers precisely because they produced similar sensations and tissue damage. You've heard stories, everyone in Yakutsk has, of people who sat too long, thinking they could tough it out and ended up with frostbite on their buttocks, requiring medical treatment and creating embarrassing conversations with doctors. There's also the apocryphal tale, which Mikhail insists is true though it sounds like urban legend, of a man whose skin briefly froze to the wooden seat when he sat down, requiring him to rock back and forth to break the connection, leaving behind a patch of skin. Whether this is true or not, it's believed widely enough that everyone takes precautions. The hover method is popular, if exhausting. You lower your pants just far enough, position yourself over the hole, and use your thigh muscles to maintain a squat while you do your business. This requires significant leg strength and balance, especially when you're wearing 20 kilograms of clothing and your feet are in bulky boots on an icy wooden floor. But it avoids skin contact with the seat entirely. The alternative is to use a piece of fur or thick felt. Many people keep one hanging in the outhouse, which you place on the seat. This provides a thin layer of insulation and prevents direct skin-to-wood contact. It's not warm, but it's survivable. You notice there is indeed a scrap of reindeer hide hanging from a nail, and you grab it with gratitude, positioning it carefully. Even with preparation, the experience is memorably unpleasant. The cold air on exposed skin is shocking, and every second feels like an eternity. You understand now why people hold it all night. This is not something you'd want to do more than absolutely necessary. Your body, sensing the extreme temperature, has already started pulling blood away from your extremities and skin surface toward your core. You can feel your fingers and toes tingling even inside their insulation, a warning that you're at the edge of what's safe. And then there's the urine itself. You've been holding it for 8 hours, so there's volume and pressure. When you finally release, you half expect to hear it freeze midstream, but what actually happens is slightly different. The liquid is warm when it leaves your body, 37 degrees Celsius, but the moment it hits the frozen waste in the pit below, you hear a sharp cracking sound, like ice breaking. The warm liquid is flash freezing on contact, creating a thin layer of ice over the existing frozen mass. Some of the liquid splashes back, tiny droplets, and these do freeze almost instantly, creating a little shower of ice particles that you definitely don't want landing on exposed skin. The smell is minimal, which is one of the few advantages of extreme cold. At minus 50 degrees Celsius, the chemical processes that create odor slow down dramatically. Everything is preserved in frozen stasis. In summer, these outhouses are notorious for their stench, but in winter, they're merely cold, not malodorous. Small mercies. You finish as quickly as possible. The entire process has taken perhaps 45 seconds, but it feels like minutes. Pulling your pants back up requires removing your mittens briefly, and even that 10 seconds of bare hands in minus 50 degrees Celsius air is enough to make your fingers start going numb. You fumble with buttons and zippers, trying to hurry but also trying not to pinch anything important with frozen metal zippers, which is apparently a common injury according to local emergency rooms. Back outside, you close the outhouse door and stumble toward Mikhail, who nods approvingly. Good. You survived first morning toilet. Gets easier, you learn to hold more, need less often. Body adapts. This is actually true, according to studies done on Yakutian residents. Over time, people who live here develop slightly larger bladder capacity and increased voluntary control over urination. The human body is remarkably adaptive, even to circumstances it has no evolutionary business adapting to. The walk back to the apartment feels longer than the walk out, possibly because you're now imagining how wonderful warmth will feel, possibly because you're slightly weakened from the experience. Your legs feel rubbery. The adrenaline from the cold exposure is wearing off. Mikhail keeps a hand on your elbow, steadying you on the icy stairs, and you're grateful for it. Back inside the stairwell, the minus 15 degrees Celsius air feels like a sauna. By the time you reach the apartment door and step into the plus 25 degrees Celsius interior, you're dizzy with the temperature change. Your goggles fog instantly. The frost on your eyelashes begins to melt, creating an uncomfortable wet sensation. Your coat, covered in frost from your frozen breath, starts shedding ice crystals onto the floor, creating a small pile of snow that Mikhail sweeps up with a brush kept by the door specifically for this purpose. "Tea," he says simply, and guides you to the kitchen table while you begin the 5-minute process of removing all your layers. Your hands are shaking slightly, not from cold, because you're already warming, but from the adrenaline crash. You've just survived what your body reasonably interpreted as a life-threatening experience, and it's going to take a few minutes to convince your nervous system that you're okay. The tea is hot, sweet, and the most delicious thing you've ever tasted. Mikhail adds a shot of vodka to it, for warmth, he says, though it's 6:30 a.m., and you don't argue. There's a tradition in Yakutia of morning vodka during the coldest months. Not for intoxication, but for what locals call internal heating. Whether vodka actually warms you is debatable. Historians note that Russian explorers often attributed their survival to vodka when in reality it may have impaired their judgment. But the psychological comfort is real. "So," Mikhail says, settling across from you with his own spiked tea, "now you understand toilet problem. This is every day, sometimes twice per day, all winter. October to April, 7 months. This is why many young people leave Yakutsk. They go to Moscow, St. Petersburg, anywhere warmer. They say life is too hard here." He shrugs. "Maybe they are right, but this is home." You're beginning to understand the particular kind of toughness that living here requires. It's not the dramatic, heroic toughness of climbing Everest or crossing Antarctica. Those are temporary challenges with clear endpoints. This is daily, grinding, repetitive toughness. Getting up every morning knowing you'll have to face that outhouse. Knowing that your comfort and dignity are going to be compromised, and that this is just normal life. There's something almost philosophical about it, the way it forces you to confront human vulnerability and bodily need in the most stripped-down, unglamorous way possible. Mikhail tells you about his grandmother, who lived through the Soviet era in a village even more remote than Yakutsk, in a house with no indoor plumbing at all. She used Outhouse until she is 85 years old, he says with obvious pride. Every day, summer and winter, minus 60 or plus 30, she go outside. She say it keeps her strong, keeps her alive. Maybe she is right. She lived to 93. There's a certain dark humor in the way Yakutians talk about these things, a refusal to treat extreme cold as anything other than a mild inconvenience, a thing to be managed rather than feared. You'll hear people say things like, "Oh, it's only minus 55 today. Quite warm," without irony. Or someone will mention casually that their car won't start because the engine block cracked from the cold, and they'll say it the way someone in California might mention a flat tire. Annoying, but these things happen. The outhouse becomes a symbol for everything else about life here. Uncomfortable, unavoidable, potentially dangerous if you're careless, but survivable with proper preparation and a certain acceptance of discomfort. Historians studying human settlement patterns often ask why people live in extreme environments, why anyone would choose this. The answer is complicated. Some people were born here and have deep cultural ties. Some came for work during Soviet times and got stuck. Some are drawn by the strange beauty or the sense of accomplishment that comes from surviving. But underlying all of it is a particular personality type, or perhaps a personality that develops in response to the place. Stubborn, practical, dark-humored, and remarkably tolerant of physical discomfort. You're going to be here for a while, experiencing this life, and the outhouse is just the beginning. But for now, you're warm, you're safe, and your bladder is empty. These are victories worth savoring. You sip your vodka-laced tea and watch the frost patterns on the window slowly begin to retreat as the sun, somewhere beyond the ice fog, begins its brief daily arc across the southern horizon. Outside, the city is waking up. You can hear the distant rumble of trucks, the sound of people starting their cars, those that remained running all night, the general bustle of 350,000 people beginning their daily negotiations with the cold. And somewhere, across this frozen city, thousands of people are having their own morning outhouse experiences, their own private battles with temperature and anatomy and dignity. Welcome to Yakutia. The toilet situation is handled. Now you just have to handle everything else. You wake the next morning, you're second in Yakutia, to a sound you can't immediately identify. A rhythmic scraping, metal on ice, coming from somewhere inside the apartment. For a confused moment, you think someone is sharpening knives. But then Mikhail's voice drifts down the hallway. Good. You are awake. Come see winter morning routine. You extract yourself from the sleeping bag, which you've learned to keep fully zipped except for a small breathing hole. The air in the bedroom is cold, not outside cold, but definitely below room temperature. You can see your breath forming small clouds. This is normal, Mikhail explained yesterday. Even with central heating, even with insulation, apartments in Yakutsk experience temperature gradients. The main living area might be plus 25 degrees Celsius, but bedrooms, bathrooms, anywhere away from the central heating pipes, drop to plus 10 or plus 15 degrees Celsius overnight. Your body heat under the sleeping bag creates a little microclimate, but venture out and you need layers immediately. You pull on wool socks, never cotton, which holds moisture and becomes useless, and a thick sweater, then shuffle into the main room where Mikhail is scraping the inside of the living room window with what looks like a paint scraper. The window is covered in a layer of ice at least 3 centimeters thick, beautiful patterns of frost crystals that look like frozen ferns, but completely opaque. No light is getting through that. Ice fog, Mikhail explains, continuing to scrape. Every night, moisture from our breathing, from cooking, from everything, it goes to coldest surface, which is window. Freezes there. Every morning, must scrape. If you don't scrape, gets thicker and thicker, eventually window breaks from weight of ice. He's not exaggerating. The ice accumulation on windows is a serious problem in Yakutian winters, and there are documented cases of double-paned windows shattering from the internal pressure of ice expanding between the panes. The scrapings fall to the floor in chunks, like snow, and Mikhail sweeps them into a bucket. This is maybe half-liter of ice from one window, he says. For windows in apartment, 2 liters of ice every day. That's how much moisture we make just by living. This daily scraping ritual is as much a part of Yakutian morning routine as brushing teeth, and children learn to do it as soon as they're tall enough to reach the windows. You notice that the windows themselves are not like windows you're used to. These are triple glazed, 3 panes of glass with air gaps between them, and even that's barely sufficient. The innermost pane, the one you're scraping, is cold enough to freeze moisture on contact. The middle pane is probably around minus 20 degrees Celsius. The outer pane is essentially the same temperature as the outside air. Despite this triple barrier, you can feel cold radiating from the window when you stand near it, a phenomenon called radiant heat loss that makes even well-insulated rooms feel cold near windows. Some apartments have taken this further, installing 4 or even 5 panes of glass, creating miniature greenhouses in their window frames. Others have given up entirely on transparency during winter, boarding up windows from the inside with wood panels and only unsealing them in May when temperatures finally climb above freezing. Historians note that traditional Saka dwellings, yurts called balagan, use stretched animal bladders or fish skin for windows specifically because these materials provided better insulation than early glass. Modern Yakutians, despite having access to contemporary materials, are essentially fighting the same battle their ancestors fought, trying to maintain a bubble of warmth in a landscape determined to freeze everything. After helping Mikhail finish the windows, you move to the next morning ritual, checking the apartment's heating. The radiators, old Soviet-era cast iron monsters, need to be bled of air occasionally, and the pipes need visual inspection for any signs of frost or dripping. Mikhail runs his hand along the main pipe that enters the apartment, feeling for cold spots. If pipe gets blockage, or if heating plant has problem, pipe can freeze very fast, he explains. Then water inside expands, pipe cracks, water comes out and freezes immediately. Can fill apartment with ice in one day. This actually happened to his neighbor 2 winters ago. The heating failed around noon, and by evening the apartment was at minus 20 degrees Celsius. A pipe burst in the wall, and water, pressurized from the central system, sprayed out and froze into a grotesque ice sculpture that filled an entire room. The neighbor had to be evacuated, and the apartment was uninhabitable for 3 months while crews worked to thaw and repair it. The ice, it was like glacier inside apartment, Mikhail says, showing you photos on his phone of a room transformed into an ice cave. They have to use heat guns for 2 weeks just to melt enough to get to pipe. The morning temperature check extends to the kitchen, where Mikhail keeps a thermometer mounted on the wall opposite the window, the coldest spot in the room. It reads plus 18 degrees Celsius, which he considers acceptable. Below plus 15 we worry, he says. Below plus 10 we call heating company, make complaint. Below plus 5 we evacuate. This isn't paranoia. It's a calibrated response to real danger. The city maintains emergency heating protocols, and when temperatures inside apartments drop below certain thresholds, it's treated as a legitimate crisis requiring official response. Next comes the daily clothing check. Mikhail opens a closet and shows you his organizational system. Items arranged by temperature rating. This coat for -40 to -50, he says, pointing to a heavy but somewhat less bulky coat than the reindeer monstrosity you've been wearing. This coat, -50 to -65, indicating the reindeer hide. This coat, -65 to -70, and he pulls out something that looks like it could stop bullets. Layered reindeer and wolf fur, leather with a hood lined with fox fur. I use this coat maybe 3-4 times per winter, when weather very bad. The boots get similar treatment. Summer boots, autumn boots, winter boots, extreme winter boots, each pair marked with tape indicating their temperature range. Mikhail explains that wearing the wrong boots for the conditions is a fast track to frostbite. Too light and your feet freeze. Too heavy and you sweat, which leads to moisture, which leads to freezing. You must match clothing exactly to temperature, he says. Like Goldilocks. Not too little, not too much, just right. This precision extends to the reindeer boot grass, which you're learning to change yourself. Mikhail shows you how to test if grass is still good. Pinch it between your fingers and smell it. Fresh grass smells like hay. Moisture-saturated grass smells slightly musty and feels limp rather than crisp. One day with wet grass, you lose toes, he says cheerfully. Yakutian people, we see many old people with missing toes, missing fingers. They are careless when young, wear wet grass, get frostbite, lose pieces. You keep all your pieces, yes. You nod vigorously, making a mental note to obsess over boot grass quality. The morning routine continues with breakfast, which is both familiar and alien. There's tea, of course, always tea, the samovar never stops, and bread and cheese. But there's also a plate of something that looks like raw fish, sliced thin and frozen solid. Stroganina, Mikhail announces proudly. Traditional Saka food. You must try. Stroganina is essentially sashimi taken to its logical extreme. Raw fish, usually whitefish, salmon, or omul, that's caught in autumn, frozen outside naturally, and then shaved into thin strips, served frozen solid, and you eat it frozen, letting it melt slightly in your mouth. The texture is unusual, crispy-ish, icy, but also delicate. The flavor is clean, slightly sweet, very fresh despite being months old, because the freezing process stops all decomposition completely. In Yakutia, we don't need freezer, Mikhail says, gesturing toward the window. Outside is freezer. In summer, we keep food inside to stay cool. In winter, we keep food outside to stay frozen. Sometimes we keep vodka outside too, not to freeze, vodka doesn't freeze easily, but to keep cold for drinking. This inversion of normal refrigeration logic is common throughout Arctic regions, but Yakutsk takes it to extremes. Some apartment buildings have communal outdoor storage areas, essentially unheated sheds, where residents keep meat, fish, and other items that need to stay frozen. It's like a public freezer, naturally refrigerated by the environment. The conversation turns to the workday ahead. Mikhail works as a mechanic at one of the city's many vehicle repair shops, a profession that's in eternal demand when cars are subjected to temperatures they were never designed to handle. You'll be accompanying him today, which means experiencing Yakutian transportation in all its problematic glory, but we'll get to that in a later section. First, though, comes another crucial morning ritual, the decision about whether to fully undress for bed tonight. Mikhail casually mentions that many Yakutians sleep in layers, thermal underwear, sometimes even wool sweaters, specifically so they're partially dressed if they need to evacuate quickly due to heating failure. When my daughter was baby, he says, my wife and I, we never fully undress for 4 months. November to February, we sleep in clothes, just in case. This practice is more common than you'd think. especially in older buildings with less reliable heating. It's a hedge against catastrophe, a way of maintaining constant readiness for a crisis that could happen any night. Some people keep emergency bags packed, warm clothes, flashlights, water, high-calorie food near the door. Others have agreements with neighbors. If heating fails in one apartment, everyone crowds into another until repairs are made. The psychological impact of this constant low-level vigilance is something researchers have started studying. There's a particular form of stress that comes from living in an environment that's passively hostile to human life, where complacency can be lethal. Historians still argue whether this constant stress contributes to the relatively high rates of alcoholism in Siberian regions, or whether alcohol use is simply a cultural tradition that predates the Soviet era. What's not debatable is that life here requires a kind of constant awareness, a mental checklist that runs in the background. Is my car running? Are my pipes frozen? Is my coat adequate? Do I have fresh boot grass? Have I scraped the windows? Mikhail seems to read your thoughts. You think this is hard now, he says, pouring more tea. Wait until you try to wash. Shower in Yakutia is special experience. He's not wrong. The bathroom, you discover, operates under a different set of rules than bathrooms elsewhere. First, you never shower in the morning. The apartment is coldest in the morning, and getting wet means you'll be cold for hours. Showers happen in the evening, when the heating system is at peak capacity and you can go directly from hot water to warm bed. Second, showers are brief. The hot water comes from the central heating system, and while it's theoretically unlimited, in practice it's often lukewarm and unpredictable. More importantly, humidity in the bathroom is dangerous. Too much steam, and it condenses on cold surfaces, walls, ceiling, windows, where it freezes. Mikhail shows you stains on the bathroom ceiling from past moisture damage. We have mold problems sometimes, he admits. Cold walls, warm moisture makes mold. We paint with special paint, anti-mold, but still it comes back. The shower itself is a tiled stall with a drain in the floor, very Eastern European in design, with a handheld shower head. The trick, Mikhail explains, is to wet yourself quickly, turn off the water, soap up, then rinse fast. Total water on time, maybe 2 minutes. You shower like soldier, he says. Fast, efficient, no enjoying. Enjoying is for summer. Even drying off requires strategy. You towel dry as much as possible inside the bathroom while it's still warm from the shower, then dress in layers immediately, starting with thermal underwear, before opening the door to the colder apartment. Hair is a particular problem. Wet hair in Yakutian winter is dangerous. Women with long hair either braid it wet and sleep on it, or use hair dryers, which are in every household despite being energy intensive, because going outside with wet hair can cause it to freeze solid within seconds. There's a famous incident, possibly apocryphal but widely believed, of a woman who stepped outside briefly with wet hair during a minus 60 degrees Celsius cold snap. Her hair froze stiff, and when she tried to brush it, it snapped off in chunks like icicles. Whether this actually happened or not, every Yakutian child is told this story as a cautionary tale, and you see very few people with wet hair outside. Ever. As morning progresses, the apartment gradually warms to its peak temperature. The sun, such as it is, has risen to its maximum height, which is about 15 degrees above the southern horizon. The light it provides is weak, slanting, orange-tinted, creating long shadows and giving everything an eternal sunset quality. This low-angle sunlight is another psychological challenge of Yakutian winters. The lack of overhead sun, the constant twilight, affects human circadian rhythms and contributes to seasonal affective disorder. Vitamin D deficiency is endemic, and during Soviet times, workers were required to sit under UV lamps for 15 minutes daily to compensate. Modern Yakutians supplement with vitamin D pills, and many apartments have special full-spectrum lamps. Mikhail switches his on. A bright, slightly blue-tinted light that mimics noon sunlight, and the difference is immediate. The apartment feels less cave-like, more alive. In January, we use lamp maybe 6 hours per day, he says. February, 4 hours. March, 2 hours. By April, have real sun again, don't need lamp. The daily routine of scraping windows, checking heating, monitoring temperatures, changing boot grass, timing showers, managing moisture, supplementing light, it's exhausting just to catalog, and these are just the morning rituals. This doesn't include the equally elaborate processes around food storage, laundry, which freezes solid on clotheslines in seconds, requiring clothes to be brought in frozen and thawed inside, car maintenance, or the constant mental load of weather monitoring. Mikhail shows you his phone, which has 3 weather apps running simultaneously. He checks them compulsively, looking for temperature predictions, wind warnings, and black ice alerts. Periods when atmospheric conditions are so extreme that even the locals curtail outdoor activity. When temperature drops below -60, or when wind is strong, city sometimes closes schools, he explains. Children cannot walk to school in that weather. Too dangerous. This danger is real and documented. Every winter, despite widespread knowledge and preparation, people die from exposure in Yakutsk and surrounding areas. Usually it's someone whose car broke down on a rural road, or someone who underestimated how long they'd be outside, or someone intoxicated who fell asleep outside. The cold is unforgiving of mistakes. As the morning routine finally winds down around 9 a.m., yes, it takes nearly 3 hours to properly begin a winter day in Yakutsk. You're beginning to understand that life here isn't just cold, it's complicated. Every simple task has multiple steps, every action requires forethought, and nothing can be taken for granted. The civilization of central heating, indoor plumbing, and modern construction creates a bubble of survivability, but that bubble is fragile and requires constant maintenance. You think about people in warmer climates who complain about having to scrape frost off their windshields on winter mornings, and you almost laugh. They have no idea. They're living in paradise and don't even know it. Mikhail catches your expression and grins. Now you understand. This is why Yakutian people, when we travel to Moscow, we think -20 degrees Celsius is warm. We wear light jacket, everyone else is bundled up, and we are laughing. We are, how you say, hardened? Like steel and forge, cold makes us hard. There's pride in his voice, and you realize that's part of it too. The cold isn't just a challenge to survive. It's an identity, a source of distinction. Yakutians take a certain pleasure in being tougher than outsiders, in having adapted to conditions that would kill most people. It's the same pride you find in any group that's overcome extreme challenges. Soldiers, athletes, survivors of difficult circumstances. The environment shapes the culture, and the culture celebrates the environment, even while complaining about it. Outside, the day has fully arrived, such as winter days arrive here. The ice fog has thinned slightly, and you can see maybe 100 meters instead of 20. People are moving along the streets, bundled beyond recognition, looking like padded astronauts walking across an alien planet. In a way, that's exactly what they are. Humans surviving in a place they have no biological business inhabiting, using technology and tradition and sheer stubbornness to maintain their presence. And somewhere out there, across the city, in hundreds of apartments, thousands of people are finishing their own morning routines, scraping their own windows, checking their own heating, preparing for their own daily negotiations with the cold. You're one of them now, at least temporarily. You've mastered the outhouse, survived the morning rituals, and you're still in possession of all your fingers and toes. The day is just beginning. By mid-morning, you're ready to face the next essential aspect of Yakutian survival: food. Not just any food, but the specific cuisine that has evolved to meet the metabolic demands of living in what amounts to a natural freezer. Mikhail announces that before heading to his mechanic shop, you'll visit the central market, Krestiansky Market, where you'll see how Yakutians shop, eat, and think about nutrition in ways that would baffle a dietitian from warmer climates. The walk to the market is only 4 blocks, but Mikhail insists on driving. Walking is fine for 30 seconds, 1 minute, he explains. But 4 blocks? 10 minutes outside? Not worth the risk today. Too cold. The thermometer reads -61 degrees Celsius, which apparently crosses some invisible threshold in the collective Yakutian consciousness. At -58 degrees Celsius, people walk to nearby destinations. At -61 degrees Celsius, they drive or stay home. The drive gives you your first real look at the city in daylight, though daylight is generous for the weak orange glow currently illuminating Yakutsk. The streets are narrower than you expected, lined with those stilted buildings that make the entire city look like it's standing on tiptoes. Between the buildings, The ubiquitous heating pipes run their courses, trailing steam like industrial dragons. The streets themselves are packed ice. Not snow, ice. That's been accumulating since October and will remain until May. The city doesn't bother clearing it anymore. They just compact it down and drive on it, creating rutted ice roads that are remarkably functional. Every vehicle you see is running, engines idling, exhaust pipes billowing white clouds. Mikhail explains the unwritten rule. If your destination is less than 2 hours away, you never turn off your engine. The risk of it not restarting is too high, and the fuel cost of idling is less than the potential cost of a frozen engine block. Some vehicles have been running continuously since November, literally months without being turned off. Their owners take shifts going down to start and rev them periodically through the night, or they install special heaters that keep the oil and coolant from freezing. The market, when you arrive, is a strange hybrid of indoor and outdoor spaces. The main hall is heated barely, maybe plus 5 degrees Celsius, which is warm enough to prevent produce from freezing but cold enough that vendors and shoppers still need to wear coats. The building itself is old Soviet era, with high ceilings and that particular aesthetic of institutional Eastern European architecture. Functional, unadorned, slightly grim. But the products, the food itself, that's where things get interesting. Mikhail leads you to the meat section first, and you're confronted with a sight that's simultaneously mundane and surreal. Entire animals, frozen solid, stacked like cordwood. Whole reindeer, still with their fur on, legs sticking straight out in the rigor of death and cold. Huge frozen fish, omel, nelma, muksun, their scales glittering with frost, mouths open in eternal gasps. Slabs of horse meat, beef, pork, all frozen to the consistency of granite, arranged in pyramids that vendors occasionally spray with water to keep them looking fresh. The water freezes instantly, creating a glossy shell. Everything here is frozen, Mikhail says unnecessarily. In Yakutia, this is how food exists. We catch fish in autumn, freeze outside, good for whole winter. Kill horse, hang outside, frozen in one day, stays perfect until we eat it. This natural preservation method has been used by indigenous Saka people for over 1,000 years, long before electricity made refrigeration possible. The modern market is really just a formalization of traditional practices. You watch as a vendor uses a large bandsaw, the kind you'd expect in a woodworking shop, to cut through a frozen reindeer haunch. The saw screams as it bites into the meat, which is as hard as hardwood. Chips of frozen flesh spray across the counter, glittering in the market's fluorescent lights. The customer, an elderly woman bundled in traditional Saka clothing, examines the cut piece, nods, and it's wrapped in brown paper. No refrigeration needed. She'll carry it home in her shopping bag, where it will remain frozen until she's ready to cook it, at which point it goes directly into boiling water or a very hot oven. Thawing is often skipped entirely. Frozen to cooked is a standard process. Mikhail buys a chunk of frozen horse meat, about 2 kilograms, and a whole frozen fish that he identifies as muksun, a type of whitefish endemic to Siberian rivers. Horse is traditional Saka food, he explains. Very nutritious, very warming. High in iron, high in fat. Good for cold weather. Historians note that the Saka people were originally horse-breeding pastoralists who migrated north from Central Asia around the 13th century, bringing their horses with them and adapting them to Arctic conditions. The result is the Saka horse, a breed that's smaller and shaggier than typical horses, capable of surviving outdoors year-round, and importantly, edible. The consumption of horse meat is something that often surprises Western visitors, but in Yakutia it's as common as beef elsewhere. In fact, there's an entire section of the market dedicated to horse products. Not just meat, but horse fat, used in cooking and traditional medicine, horse hair, for rope and insulation, and even frozen horse blood, which is used to make a traditional soup called khan that's considered a delicacy. Next, Mikhail guides you to the fish section, which deserves its own horror movie soundtrack. Entire walls are covered with frozen fish of every size, from small grayling no bigger than your hand to massive sturgeon that must weigh 40 kilograms. The fish are so thoroughly frozen that they can be stacked vertically, leaning against each other like books on a shelf. Their eyes are clouded with ice, their fins spread in frozen fans. This fish, Mikhail says, pointing to a particularly large specimen, is caught in September, maybe October. Now is January. Fish is still good, better than fresh, actually. Freezing kills parasites, makes safe to eat raw. And indeed, stroganina, that raw frozen fish dish you tried for breakfast, is not just safe but considered healthier than cooked fish by traditional standards. The rapid freezing preserves all the omega-3 fatty acids and vitamins that would be lost in cooking. You watch a vendor prepare stroganina for a customer. He takes a frozen fish, clamps it in a vise on his counter, and uses a large knife to shave thin curls of flesh from the body, working with the grain of the meat. The curls fall onto a plate in delicate, translucent ribbons, like fish-flavored rose petals made of ice. The customer adds salt, pepper, and a squeeze of lemon from a bottle, fresh lemons in January in Yakutsk being impossibly expensive and rare, then eats it right there at the counter, the frozen fish melting on his tongue. Mikhail explains the traditional way of eating stroganina. You take a curl, dip it in a mixture of salt and pepper, and eat it quickly before it melts. The texture should be icy and crispy, not mushy. If fish melts before eating, is ruined, he says seriously. Must eat frozen. This is the way. You're beginning to understand that the extreme cold has created not just a culture but an entire cuisine based on the solid state of matter. In most of the world, food exists in a hierarchy of freshness. Fresh is best, frozen is acceptable, and anything in between is suspect. In Yakutia, frozen is fresh. Frozen is the default state. Frozen is not just preserved food. It's how food exists naturally for 8 months of the year. The produce section is smaller and sadder. There are potatoes, carrots, onions, cabbage, all root vegetables that store well, but they're expensive and not particularly appetizing. A single apple costs what would be, in your home currency, about $3. A small bunch of grapes is $7. Fresh vegetables in winter are a luxury that most Yakutians skip entirely, relying instead on preserved, pickled, or frozen alternatives. Cabbage preserved in brine, pickled cucumbers, frozen berries collected in summer. These provide the bulk of vegetable nutrition during winter months. Mikhail picks up a jar of pickled cloudberries, a tart orange berry that grows in the tundra during the brief summer. This is vitamin C, he says. In old times, Saka people eat raw liver for vitamin, eat berries, drink birch sap. No vegetables, but no scurvy. They know how to survive. Indeed, the traditional Saka diet, high in meat and fish, supplemented with berries and wild plants, provided adequate nutrition for survival in extreme conditions, though modern Yakutians supplement with store-bought vitamins just to be safe. The dairy section reveals another adaptation. Butter and sour cream sold in frozen blocks, stacked like bricks. Milk comes in bags that are frozen solid. We keep dairy outside, in balcony storage, Mikhail explains. Acts like freezer, but free. When we need milk, we bring in frozen bag, put in warm water, is ready in 10 minutes. Some apartments have special balcony storage boxes, essentially unheated outdoor cupboards, where frozen goods are kept. It's like having a chest freezer that runs on winter rather than electricity. And then there's the vodka section. Oh, the vodka section. An entire wall of the market is dedicated to vodka in every imaginable variety. Cheap rotgut in plastic bottles, mid-range brands in glass, premium vodkas in fancy packaging, flavored vodkas, honey vodkas, vodkas infused with everything from ginger to pine nuts. Vodka in Yakutia is not just a drink. It's a currency, a social lubricant, a medicine, or so people claim, and a symbol of hospitality. In Yakutia, we say vodka is third pillar of survival, Mikhail says with a grin. First pillar is fire, second is fur, third is vodka. He's joking, but only partially. Vodka consumption in Siberian regions is significantly higher than the Russian average, which is itself quite high. Historians still argue whether this is a response to the harsh environment, a form of self-medication against cold, darkness, and isolation, or whether it's a cultural tradition that has roots in Russian colonial history and the availability of grain alcohol. What's not debatable is that alcohol abuse is a serious public health issue in Yakutia, contributing to reduced life expectancy and social problems. But vodka also serves practical purposes. It's used as antifreeze in washing water, a small amount added to buckets prevents freezing, as a disinfectant, and yes, as a warming drink when consumed in small quantities. The traditional sake approach to vodka is different from the stereotype of Russian drinking. Small shots taken with food, never on an empty stomach, and never to the point of incapacitation in winter, because passing out drunk in Yakutian winter is a death sentence. Mikhail buys a bottle of mid-range vodka, a bag of frozen pelmeni, Russian dumplings that are eaten boiled, and some black bread that's been frozen and will need to thaw. Your shopping basket now contains horse meat, frozen fish, vodka, dumplings, and bread. A snapshot of Yakutian cuisine in 5 items. At the checkout, you notice the prices are significantly higher than you'd pay for similar items in Western Russia. This is the Northern Delivery Surcharge. Everything that's not locally produced has to be transported huge distances, often by ice road or air, adding massive costs. A can of Coca-Cola costs about $4. A chocolate bar is $3. Imported cheese is astronomical. This economic reality shapes dietary choices. People eat local products not just by tradition, but by necessity. As you leave the market, Mikhail gestures to a small cafe attached to the building. We have quick lunch, yes? Try traditional food. You agree, curious about what passes for restaurant food in this frozen world. The cafe is warm, actually warm, maybe plus 22 degrees Celsius, and crowded with locals taking lunch breaks. The menu is in Russian with no English, but Mikhail translates. Kurdak, mutton fried with organ meats. Salamat, a creamy dish made from fried flour and sour cream. Buz, steamed dumplings filled with meat. And the aforementioned khan, the blood soup. You order cautiously, getting buz and salamat, avoiding the blood soup for now. The booze arrives steaming, the dumplings plump and slightly translucent, filled with meat that's been spiced with garlic and onion. You bite carefully. There's hot broth inside that scalds your tongue, and the flavor is rich, fatty, satisfying in a way that feels physiologically necessary. Your body, burning through calories just to maintain temperature, craves exactly this. Fat, protein, salt, heat. The salamat is stranger. A porridge-like dish that's somewhere between cream of wheat and gravy, heavy with butter and sour cream, slightly sweet. It's dense, almost thick enough to stand a spoon in, and a small bowl of it sits in your stomach like ballast. This is energy food, Mikhail explains. Old people say salamat keeps you warm for 6 hours, makes fire in your belly. There's actually some science to this. The high fat content in traditional Yakutian foods serves crucial metabolic functions in extreme cold. Fats provide more than twice the calories per gram of carbohydrates or protein, and they metabolize slowly, providing sustained energy. The traditional diet, high in animal fats, organ meats, and fish oils, contains enormous amounts of vitamins A and D from liver and fish, omega-3 fatty acids from fish, and iron from meat and blood. It's a diet optimized by centuries of trial and error for survival in the coldest inhabited place on Earth. Modern nutritionists studying Yakutian traditional diets have found them to be surprisingly healthy despite being almost entirely devoid of vegetables and grains for much of the year. Heart disease rates among indigenous Saka people following traditional diets are lower than in urban populations eating Western-style diets. Whether this is due to the specific foods, the genetics of the population, or other lifestyle factors remains an open question in nutritional research. As you eat, you observe your fellow diners. They're demolishing their food with focused intensity, shoveling in enormous portions of fatty meat, drinking gallons of hot tea, talking and laughing between bites. The cafe is loud, warm, steamy from all the hot food and hot drinks, windows fogged opaque with condensation. It feels alive in a way that's almost defiant. A warm, bright bubble of humanity in the frozen darkness outside. Mikhail orders a shot of vodka despite it being noon, sees your expression, and shrugs. For digestion, he claims, though he's grinning. He downs it in one smooth motion, followed by a bite of black bread, then sits back contentedly. Good food, good drink. Now we can work. Body has fuel. And that's really what food means here, fuel. Not pleasure, though there's pleasure in it, but essential fuel to keep the biological furnace running. An average person in Yakutsk burns somewhere between 3,500 and 5,000 calories per day just maintaining body temperature and doing normal activities. In extreme cold or during heavy physical work, that can climb to 6,000 or more. You can't maintain that on salads and skinny lattes. You need fat, you need protein, you need dense, heavy, warming food. As you prepare to leave the cafe, you feel genuinely warm for the first time since arriving, warm from the inside out, your core temperature boosted by hot food and the cafe's heating. The cold, when you step outside, is shocking but more manageable. You understand now why locals time their activities around meals, why the workday often involves multiple tea breaks, why refusing food when offered is considered not just rude but dangerous. In Yakutia, food isn't just sustenance. It's survival technology. And the strange inverted logic of keeping refrigerators to warm food, of using the outdoors as a freezer, of eating raw frozen fish as a delicacy. It all makes perfect sense once you accept the fundamental reality of this place. The temperature outside isn't a weather condition. It's the permanent state of existence, and everything, including cuisine, has adapted accordingly. Fed and fortified, you follow Mikhail to his truck for the drive to his mechanic shop. But before you even get there, you're confronted with the next brutal reality of Yakutian life. What extreme cold does to the human body. Not over days or weeks, but right now, minute by minute, as you exist in an environment that is actively hostile to mammalian physiology. The walk from the cafe to the truck, maybe 15 meters, is enough for you to feel it starting. Your face, despite being covered except for your goggled eyes, begins to hurt. Not ache, not feel uncomfortable, but genuinely hurt. A sharp, biting pain that intensifies with each second. The exposed skin around your eyes, that small vulnerable strip between your goggles and scarf, is experiencing the early stages of frostbite. The blood vessels in your skin are constricting, trying to preserve core temperature, reducing blood flow to the surface. Without blood flow, your skin cells begin to freeze. Mikhail notices you touching your face and shakes his head. Don't touch with mittens, makes worse. Creates cold spot. Just breathe onto face through scarf. Warm air helps. You try it, exhaling deliberately through the scarf toward your cheeks, and the momentary warmth does help, though it also creates more ice buildup on the scarf itself. Once inside the truck, which Mikhail left running with the heater on full blast, naturally, you peel back your scarf slightly and touch your face with bare fingers, a risky move itself. Your cheeks are numb, slightly waxy to the touch. This is first-degree frostbite, also called frostnip, where the outer layers of skin freeze, but the damage is reversible if you warm up gradually. Leave it for a few more minutes, let the freezing extend deeper, and you get second-degree frostbite with blisters. A few minutes beyond that, third-degree frostbite with tissue death and permanent damage. In severe cases, fourth-degree frostbite extends through skin and muscle to bone, requiring amputation. You are lucky, only 15 seconds, not too bad, Mikhail says, examining your face with a practiced eye. But you see now? This is why we move fast outside, why we plan every step. You cannot stand and think in -60. You move, you do what you need, you get back inside. No hesitation, no wandering. Cold does not wait. He shows you his own hands, thick, calloused, and missing the tip of his left pinky finger. Lost this when I am 22, he says matter-of-factly. Working on car outside. Took off gloves to do delicate work with tools. Maybe 5 minutes with bare hands. Didn't feel cold at first. Hands were working, blood was flowing. But when I finish and go inside, finger turns white, then black. Frostbite to bone. Doctor cuts it off. He wiggles the stump without apparent regret. Now I know better. Now I use special tools I can operate with gloves on, or I bring car inside heated garage. You keep all your fingers, you stay smart. This casual acceptance of permanent disfigurement is common in Yakutia. You see it everywhere once you start looking. Missing fingertips, shortened toes, scarred cheeks and noses where tissue has been damaged and healed. It's not a mark of shame but a badge of experience. Proof that you've lived here long enough to make mistakes and learn from them. The elderly, particularly, show the accumulated damage of decades in extreme cold. Gnarled hands, feet that no longer fit properly in normal boots, faces with patches of discolored skin where frostbite has repeatedly damaged and healed. As the truck warms up, which takes a full 10 minutes even though it was already running, because the interior temperature had still dropped to perhaps minus 20 degrees Celsius during your cafe visit. Mikhail explains the physiology of cold survival. Human body is furnace, yes? Heart pumps blood. Blood carries heat. When you are in cold, body protects core, heart, lungs, brain, organs. So it cuts blood to skin, to fingers, to toes, to nose, to ears. These parts, body says, we can lose these, but we keep core alive. This is why fingers and toes freeze first. Body sacrifices them. This vasoconstriction response is automatic and unconscious, a survival mechanism evolved over millions of years. But it's designed for temporary cold exposure, not sustained life in minus 60 degrees Celsius conditions. What happens to long-term Yakutsk residents is a form of physiological adaptation. Their bodies develop enhanced circulation to extremities, their cold pain receptors become less sensitive, and they develop greater tolerance for the discomfort of cold exposure. Studies on indigenous Saka people have found measurably different circulatory responses compared to recent immigrants from warmer regions, suggesting either genetic adaptation over generations or rapid physiological acclimatization. But adaptation has limits. Mikhail describes the various stages of cold injury with the casual precision of someone who's seen them all. First, you get frostnip, skin is white, numb, but still soft underneath. This is okay, will heal. Second, you get blisters, this is tissue damage, takes weeks to heal, very painful. Third, you get black skin, tissue is dead, must be removed. Fourth, you get frozen to bone. This is amputation, no saving it. The progression from stage 1 to stage 4 can happen in under 10 minutes at minus 60 degrees Celsius with wind. Without wind, you might have 20 minutes. These aren't abstract numbers. They're survival parameters that every Yakutian internalizes. Children learn them in school alongside arithmetic and reading. You learn to calculate exposure time automatically. If it's minus 55 degrees Celsius and you need to walk 3 blocks, that's approximately 4 minutes of exposure, which means you're safe if you hurry but at risk if you dawdle or if something goes wrong. The wind factor, what meteorologists call wind chill, is particularly vicious. At minus 60 degrees Celsius with no wind, you might survive exposed for 15 minutes. At minus 60 degrees Celsius with 30 kilometers per hour winds, you'll develop frostbite in under 2 minutes. The wind strips away the thin layer of warm air that surrounds your body and clothing, forcing your body to constantly regenerate that heat, which accelerates heat loss exponentially. Yakutians obsessively monitor wind forecasts, and the city has an informal but widely understood scale. Under 20 kilometers per hour is acceptable, 20 to 40 kilometers per hour is bad, and over 40 kilometers per hour is don't go outside unless you're dying. As you drive through the city, Mikhail points out various cold-related phenomena. See that woman? Watch her walk. You observe a bundled figure moving along the sidewalk with a distinctive shuffling gait, taking tiny steps, keeping her feet close to the ground. This is Yakutian walk, Mikhail explains. You don't lift feet high, waste energy, lose balance on ice. Take longer. You shuffle, slide, conserve movement. Also, big steps make you breathe hard, and hard breathing is dangerous. Breathing itself is a calculated risk in extreme cold. The air entering your lungs at minus 60 degrees Celsius is so cold that it can cause bronchospasm, a constriction of the airways, and damage to lung tissue. The usual recommendation is to breathe through a scarf or other fabric that slightly warms and humidifies the air. Some people use specially designed masks with heat exchangers. But even with precautions, vigorous activity in extreme cold can damage lungs. Mikhail describes cases of people who ran to catch a bus in minus 65 degrees Celsius and ended up coughing blood from frozen lung tissue. Your own breathing, you notice, has become conscious and controlled. You're taking small, measured breaths through the scarf, nothing deep or rapid. Your body has figured out instinctively that gulping cold air is dangerous. This is another adaptation. After a few days in Yakutia, your breathing patterns change. You become a shallow breather, taking in just enough air to function, never more. The eyes present their own challenges. Mikhail explains that at extreme temperatures, your tears can freeze. Not figuratively, literally freeze on your eyeballs and lashes. You blink, and lashes stick together from ice, he says. Have to rub them carefully to open eyes again. If you cry outside, from cold, from wind, from emotion, tears freeze on your cheeks in lines. Look like ice tracks. Some people wear ski goggles or full face masks to prevent this, creating a small warm zone around the eyes. But goggles fog up from breath and body heat, creating their own visibility problems. Mikhail's truck passes a bus stop where several people are waiting, and you notice they're not standing still. Everyone is moving, shifting weight from foot to foot, flexing fingers inside mittens, doing small squats, rotating shoulders. You never stand still in cold, Mikhail confirms. Movement creates heat. You stop moving, you start freezing. Bus riders, they exercise constantly while waiting. Sometimes bus is late, sometimes very late. You cannot just stand and wait. You move or you leave and come back. This constant movement requirement affects every aspect of public life. Schools have heated bus stop shelters for children. Workplaces have warming stations at entrances. Shops keep their front areas extra heated for people coming in from the cold. The entire city is designed around the assumption that any stationary period outside is dangerous. You ask about the homeless population, and Mikhail's expression darkens. We have few homeless in winter, they die or they go to shelter or they leave city. Sleeping outside in Yakutsk winter is death sentence. Police pick up anyone they find outside at night, take to warming shelter even if person doesn't want to go. Is not kindness exactly, is preventing frozen bodies in streets. This grim calculus is a practical reality. The city cannot afford to have people freezing to death on sidewalks, both for humanitarian reasons and for basic public health. The truck's heater is now blasting at full capacity, and you're finally feeling genuinely warm again, but you notice Mikhail keeps his coat on and doesn't remove his gloves. Never undress in vehicle, he explains. If vehicle breaks down, you have maybe 10 minutes before interior is same temperature as outside. You must stay dressed, stay ready. This is rule of survival. Historians note that this constant readiness is a holdover from earlier times when breakdowns were more common and help less available. Soviet-era vehicles were notoriously unreliable, and stories of people freezing to death in broken-down trucks on rural roads are part of collective memory. Modern vehicles are better, but the culture of preparedness remains. Every vehicle in Yakutia carries emergency supplies. Extra warm clothes, blankets, candles, which can heat a small space surprising well, matches, high-energy food, a shovel, and often a small stove or heating device. Mikhail shows you his emergency kit, stored behind the driver's seat. A huge reindeer fur blanket, spare boots, extra mittens, a thermos always filled with hot tea, refilled daily, a bag of nuts and dried meat, candles, waterproof matches, a small axe, and a bright orange flag to signal for help. This kit has saved my life twice, he says seriously. Once, truck broke down on road to village, -65 outside, no help for 4 hours. I wrapped in blanket, burned candles, ate food, stayed alive. Without kit, I would die. The conversation turns to hypothermia, the other major cold-related threat besides frostbite. While frostbite is localized tissue damage, hypothermia is whole-body cooling, where your core temperature drops below 35 degrees Celsius. Mild hypothermia causes shivering, confusion, and loss of coordination. Moderate hypothermia stops the shivering, a very bad sign, causes severe confusion and sleepiness. Severe hypothermia, core temperature below 28 degrees Celsius, causes unconsciousness and death. The dangerous thing about hypothermia is you don't realize it happening, Mikhail says. Brain gets cold, thinking becomes fuzzy, you make bad decisions. People take off clothes because they feel hot. This is called paradoxical undressing, happens when brain is confused from cold. Then they fall asleep outside and die. We find bodies sometimes in spring. People who got drunk, wandered outside, took off coat because they felt warm, then froze to death. This paradoxical undressing is a well-documented phenomenon in severe hypothermia cases, where victims in the late stages feel an intense sensation of heat and remove their clothing, accelerating their death. The mechanism isn't fully understood, but it may involve a sudden dilation of blood vessels or confusion of the hypothalamus, the brain region regulating temperature. Rescue workers in Arctic regions are trained to look for discarded clothing as a sign of where to search for victims. You're now deeply aware of your own body temperature, how your core feels warm but your extremities are still cold despite the truck's heater, how your breathing has become shallow, how you're constantly adjusting your scarf and mittens to maintain optimal insulation. This hyper-awareness is exhausting. You're using mental energy just to monitor your own physiological state, a background task that people in normal climates never have to perform. Mikhail pulls into the parking area of his shop, a large metal building that, like everything else, sits on stilts. Now comes the interesting part, he says with a grin that suggests his definition of interesting might not match yours. You see what cold does to machines, to metal, to everything humans build. If you think cold is hard on bodies, wait until you see what it does to engines. You brace yourself, because if there's one thing you've learned in your short time in Yakutia, it's that every new revelation about life here is somehow worse than you imagined. The cold isn't just an inconvenience or a hardship. It's an active, aggressive force that attacks every aspect of existence. Biological, mechanical, psychological. Your fingers throb slightly as blood flow returns to them fully, a painful tingling sensation called the frosties by locals. It's a reminder that you've just survived another exposure, that your body has once again negotiated with the environment and come out intact, if slightly damaged. You look at your hands, count all 10 fingers, and feel grateful in a way that's entirely new to you. In a warmer climate, you take fingers for granted. Here, every day that you keep them is a small victory worth celebrating. The shop's door beckons, promising heat and shelter. But first, you have to get from the truck to the door, another 30 seconds of exposure, another small calculated risk in a life that's become an endless series of them. Mikhail opens his door, and the cold rushes in like a living thing, hungry and eager. Quick now, he says, move fast, and welcome to my workplace, where we fix the impossible every single day. The mechanic shop is a cathedral to human stubbornness, a massive heated space filled with vehicles in various states of disassembly, their mechanical guts exposed like patients on operating tables. The temperature inside hovers around plus 15 degrees Celsius, which feels tropical compared to outside, though it's cold enough that everyone still wears heavy sweaters and keeps coats within reach. You can't heat a space this large to comfortable room temperature in Yakutian winter. The energy costs would be astronomical and the heating system couldn't keep up anyway. The building itself is a testament to Soviet-era engineering. Steel frame, corrugated metal walls with thick insulation sandwiched between layers, and that now familiar elevation on concrete pillars to prevent permafrost melt. The floor is concrete, stained with decades of oil, grease, and antifreeze, the archaeological record of mechanical struggle against the cold. Overhead, massive heating ducts distribute warmth from a central furnace that sounds like a small jet engine in constant operation. Mikhail's co-workers greet him with the easy camaraderie of people who share a common battle. There's Dmitry, a heavy-set man in his 50s with frost scars across his nose. Yuri, younger, maybe 30, with only 9 fingers, and Olga, the shop's manager, who breaks the stereotype of mechanics being exclusively male and who Mikhail whispers, knows more about engines than anyone in Yakutsk. The shop currently houses 5 vehicles, 2 trucks, a small sedan, a UAZ, the Russian military-style SUV that's popular in extreme climates, and a bus. Each has a story, and each story involves the cold doing something catastrophic to metal, rubber, or fluid that those materials were never designed to withstand. Let me show you the problems, Mikhail says, leading you to the nearest truck. This came in yesterday. Owner says engine won't start. You know why? He pops the hood and points to the engine block. You see cracks, actual fractures in the metal, spider webbing across the surface like shattered glass. Coolant froze despite antifreeze. When water freezes, it expands. Expansion cracks block. Now this engine is garbage. Needs complete replacement. This happens more often than you'd think. Antifreeze is rated for specific temperatures, typically down to minus 40 degrees Celsius or minus 50 degrees Celsius for heavy-duty formulations. But Yakutsk regularly exceeds those limits, and if someone's antifreeze is old, diluted, or the wrong type, it can freeze despite being called antifreeze. The result is catastrophic. Cracked engine blocks, burst radiators, destroyed water pumps. A single night of inadequate antifreeze protection can total a vehicle. Dmitry is working on the sedan, and his problem is different but equally bizarre. Gasoline gels. He explains in heavily accented English, apparently showing off for the foreign visitor. He holds up a fuel filter that's completely clogged with a waxy substance. In extreme cold, paraffins in gasoline become solid, like candle wax. Clogs fuel lines, filter injectors. Engine starves for fuel, won't run. The solution involves heated fuel lines, special winter blend gasoline with additives, and fuel heaters that run off the battery. But even with all precautions, fuel can still gel at extreme temperatures, leaving vehicles stranded. The bus presents an entirely different set of problems. Yuri is underneath it, cursing in Russian, working on what he explains is the air brake system. In warm climate, buses use air brakes. Compressed air pushes brake pads. Simple, reliable, he says. In Yakutsk, moisture in air system freezes, creates ice in brake lines. Brakes fail or brakes stick on, can't release. Very dangerous. The solution is a complex system of air dryers, heaters, and antifreeze injection into the airlines, but it requires constant maintenance. This bus, driver didn't drain air system at night like supposed to. Water accumulated, froze, now whole system is compromised. Maybe weak to fix properly. Olga beckons you over to her workspace, where she's examining a collection of parts that look like they've been through a war. These are rubber components, belts, hoses, seals, she explains. You know what cold does to rubber? She takes a serpentine belt, the kind that drives alternators and other accessories, and bends it. It snaps in half with a sharp crack like a breadstick. Rubber becomes brittle in extreme cold, loses flexibility. This belt worked fine yesterday at -45, but at -60 today, it snaps under normal tension. Same with hoses, they become hard, crack, leak. Seals shrink, stop sealing. Everything rubber is enemy of Yakutian winter. The shop stocks special cold-resistant rubber components made from silicone or advanced polymers. But even these have limits. Some vehicles in Yakutsk go through multiple belts per winter. Hoses are replaced as routine maintenance rather than waiting for failure. Door seals are a particular problem. Car doors have rubber gaskets that compress to create a weatherproof seal, but in extreme cold, these gaskets become hard and brittle. People routinely find their car doors frozen shut, requiring gentle heating with a hair dryer or hot water, carefully applied to avoid cracking glass from thermal shock, to open them. Mikhail moves on to one of the trucks, this one with its transmission disassembled on a workbench. This is oil problem, he says, holding up what looks like a jar of jelly. This is transmission fluid, removed from truck this morning. Should be liquid, yes, but at -60, oil becomes thick like jelly, like honey. Transmission cannot shift gears. Bearings cannot turn properly. Is like trying to swim in molasses. The viscosity problem extends to all lubricants. Engine oil, transmission fluid, differential oil, even grease. All become dramatically thicker as temperature drops. Standard motor oil that flows freely at 20 degrees Celsius becomes a semi-solid at -60 degrees Celsius. Engines trying to turn over against this thick, cold oil require enormous battery power and starter motor strength. Many engines simply can't overcome the resistance and won't start. The solution is specially formulated Arctic-grade oils with viscosities rated for extreme cold, but even these have limits. And batteries, Olga adds, overhearing the conversation. Oh, batteries are special nightmare. She shows you a standard car battery, then points to a chart on the wall. At +20 degrees Celsius, this battery provides 100% of its cranking power. At 0 degrees Celsius, maybe 80%. At -20 degrees Celsius, maybe 50%. At -40 degrees Celsius, maybe 30%. At -60 degrees Celsius, maybe 15 to 20% if you are lucky. But same time, cold oil means engine needs more power to turn over, maybe 3 times as much. So you have battery that's 80% weaker trying to turn engine that's 300% harder to start. You see the problem? This battery problem is why vehicles in Yakutsk either run continuously or are stored in heated garages. Some people remove their batteries every night and bring them inside to stay warm. Others install multiple batteries in parallel or use capacitor-based jumpstart systems. The most common solution is simply to never turn off your engine from November through March, literally months of continuous operation. Mikhail shows you his daily driver parked outside the shop, engine idling as always. This truck, I started it in October. Today is January. Engine has not stopped once. Sometimes I go out at night, rev engine, check gauges, make sure is running smoothly. Is like having baby. Must check constantly. The odometer is meaningless because the engine runs 24/7, accumulating thousands of idle hours. Oil changes are done by hours of operation rather than kilometers driven. It's an entirely different paradigm of vehicle ownership. The shop itself has infrastructure designed around these problems. There are heated parking spots, essentially garage bays with floor heating and electrical outlets, where vehicles can be brought in to warm up before work begins. There are parts washing stations with heated degreasing solution, because cleaning cold parts with cold solvent is nearly impossible. There are special warming cabinets where rubber seals and gaskets are heated before installation, and pneumatic tools are all cold-rated models that function at low temperatures. Yuri demonstrates another Yakutian automotive tradition, the starting fire. For vehicles that haven't been running, mechanics sometimes build a small fire under the engine, carefully using a metal tray to contain the flames, to warm the oil pan and engine block enough for starting. This sounds insanely dangerous, and it is, but it's also sometimes the only way to revive a completely cold engine. You must be very careful, Yuri says seriously. Fire not too close, not too hot. Never leave unattended. But his traditional method works for 50 years, maybe longer. Historians note that this practice predates Soviet times, with indigenous peoples using similar methods to warm metal tools and equipment. The modern version involves professional heating equipment, propane torches with large diffusers, electric heating blankets, even large hairdryer-like devices, but in a pinch, a controlled fire in a metal pan does the job. The scorch marks you saw under parked cars yesterday make more sense now. The conversation turns to tires, and Dmitri gets animated, as if this is his particular area of expertise and grievance. Tires? Oh, tires are maybe worst problem of all, he says, walking you over to a display of various tire cross-sections. Normal tire with normal rubber becomes like plastic at extreme cold. Hard, no flexibility, no grip, and shape changes. Tire develops flat spots from sitting overnight, becomes square instead of round. You drive on square tires, feels like riding on wooden wheels, boom boom boom, until they warm up and round out again. He shows you a tire that's been cut in half to display its internal structure. Tire is many layers, rubber, steel belts, fabric cords. Different materials expand and contract at different rates in temperature changes. This creates internal stress. Stress leads to delamination. Layers separate inside tire. Cannot see from outside, but tire is damaged, can fail suddenly. Tire failures in Yakutsk are common and dangerous, particularly at highway speeds on ice roads where there's no shoulder and no help for kilometers. The solution is yet another specialized product, winter tires, but not the winter tires you'd buy in Canada or Norway. These are Arctic-rated tires with rubber compounds that remain flexible to minus 60 degrees Celsius or below, with special siping, small cuts in the tread that create grip on ice, and reinforced construction to handle thermal stress. They're expensive. A set might cost what a used car costs elsewhere, but they're mandatory for survival. Olga shows you the shop's tire-changing equipment, which includes a warming cabinet. We never mount cold tire on rim, she explains. Tire must be warmed to at least 0 degrees Celsius, otherwise rubber is too stiff, will crack during installation. Same for removal. Must warm tire first or you damage it getting off rim. This means tire changes that would take 20 minutes in a warm climate take 2 hours in Yakutsk. An hour to warm the tires, 30 minutes to actually do the work. and 30 minutes of cleanup and checking. The metalwork presents its own challenges. Mikhail shows you welding operations being done in an enclosed booth heated to plus 20 degrees Celsius. Cannot weld cold metal, brittle, cracks, welds fail. Must warm metal first, maintain temperature during welding, cool slowly after. Takes much time. Steel that's been subjected to extreme cold becomes more brittle, with reduced ductility and impact resistance. Welds performed on cold steel can crack immediately or fail under stress. Every metal repair requires careful temperature management. Even hand tools are problematic. Mikhail demonstrates with a standard wrench, which at shop temperature feels normal. He takes it outside for 30 seconds, brings it back, and hands it to you. The metal is so cold it burns your palm even through your calloused hands. Mechanics must wear gloves always, but gloves reduce dexterity, he says. So we use special thin liner gloves under work gloves, or we use insulated tool handles. But still, hands get cold, fingers get stiff, hard to work. Drop a tool outside, it's gone until spring, buried in snow and ice. The electrical systems are their own nightmare. Wiring insulation becomes brittle and cracks. Connectors contract and lose contact. Electronics malfunction or fail entirely. Modern vehicles with their complex computer systems, sensors, and electrical accessories are particularly vulnerable. Olga shows you a dashboard that's been removed from a vehicle. Half the warning lights are illuminated because sensors are reading incorrect values due to cold-affected calibration or simply failing from thermal stress. Old Soviet vehicles, UAZ, Lada, Ural trucks, these are better for Yakutsk, Dmitry says with a touch of nostalgia. Simple engines, no computers, no fancy systems. You can fix with hammer and wire. New vehicles, European cars, Japanese cars, too complicated, too sensitive. They come to Yakutsk and die. This has created an interesting vehicle demographic. Yakutsk streets are filled with older, simpler vehicles that have proven their cold weather reliability. The newest, fanciest cars belong to the wealthy who can afford heated garages and constant professional maintenance. As the workday progresses, you watch the mechanics' routines. They take frequent breaks to warm their hands, drinking endless tea from thermoses kept in a heated cabinet. They rotate tasks, no one working on the coldest jobs, like underneath vehicles, for more than 20 minutes at a time. They help each other constantly because some repairs require multiple people not for complexity but for speed. Getting the work done before hands become too cold to function. Around noon, a customer arrives in a panic. His vehicle died on the road 5 blocks away. Mikhail and Yuri gear up, full cold weather equipment, and load a portable heater, jumper cables, and tools into a truck. You're invited along for what turns out to be a mobile repair operation. The stranded vehicle, a small sedan, sits by the roadside, the owner standing nearby, stamping his feet to stay warm. The diagnosis is quick: dead battery, compounded by gelled fuel. Mikhail connects jumper cables from the running truck, but even with a boost, the sedan's engine barely turns over. "We must warm engine," he declares, and Yuri sets up the portable propane heater, directing its flame toward the engine bay while maintaining careful distance. For 10 minutes, they warm the engine while the owner apologizes repeatedly, clearly embarrassed. Finally, with the engine warmed and the battery boosted, the sedan coughs to life, running roughly at first but smoothing out as it warms. Mikhail adds a bottle of fuel antifreeze to the tank, basically alcohol that lowers the freezing point, and advises the owner to drive it directly home or to a heated garage, not to shut it off. The owner pays cash on the spot, emergency roadside repairs command premium prices, and drives away trailing blue smoke from the cold engine. "This happens maybe 10 times per day in Yakutsk," Mikhail says as you drive back to the shop. "People take chances, think they can make one more trip without warming engine, think their battery is good enough. Then they are stuck calling for help. We stay very busy." Back at the shop, as afternoon's weak light begins to fade into evening darkness, you sit in the warm break room with the mechanics, sharing tea and leftover buzz from someone's lunch. The conversation drifts to disasters. Everyone has stories of spectacularly failed repairs, vehicles abandoned after being beyond economic repair, close calls with fires or injuries. Olga tells about a bus engine that cracked so severely from frozen coolant that when they started it, coolant sprayed everywhere and immediately froze, creating an ice sculpture of the entire engine. Was beautiful, actually, like art installation, she laughs. But bus was ruined, complete loss. Dmitri describes a car that sat outside for 2 weeks during a minus 70 degrees Celsius cold snap. The owner was hospitalized and couldn't move it. When we finally tow it in, we open hood, and everything is destroyed. Hoses cracked in 50 places. Battery exploded from internal freezing. Windshield washer reservoir shattered. Engine block cracked. Even plastic parts were fractured, just snapped from cold stress. Was like car had been in battle. These stories are told with dark humor, without horror, because horror would imply that these things are unusual. In Yakutsk, catastrophic vehicle failure is routine, expected, budgeted for. Every car owner knows that their vehicle is one cold snap away from destruction, one mechanical failure away from being stranded, one frozen fuel line away from serious trouble. The Soviet-era infrastructure that supports all of this, the central heating system, the power grid, the fuel distribution network, is itself constantly on the edge of failure. Everyone remembers the heating crisis of 2017, when a main heating pipe burst and several neighborhoods lost heat for days in minus 58 degrees Celsius weather. Emergency evacuations, people sheltering in schools and community centers, elderly residents hospitalized for hypothermia. It became a national news story and an example of infrastructure vulnerability in extreme climates. Historians still argue whether Soviet urban planning in Siberia was brilliant adaptation to impossible conditions or reckless disregard for human welfare, building cities in places no cities should exist. The answer, perhaps, is both. Yakutsk exists because of Stalin-era forced settlement policies, built by Gulag labor, populated by prisoners and exiles who had no choice. But it persists because of human adaptability, ingenuity, and yes, a certain stubborn pride in surviving the unsurvivable. As the shop prepares to close for the evening, though in Yakutsk, closing often means reducing staff rather than actually shutting down. Since vehicles need work around the clock, Mikhail walks you to his truck. You see now why I say living here is not just cold problem, he says. Is everything problem. Body, buildings, machines, food, water, everything must be constantly managed, constantly maintained. Nothing works naturally here. Everything is fight. You climb into the truck, now familiar with the routine. Minimize exposure time, move efficiently, don't touch metal with bare skin. The engine is still running, as it has been all day, burning fuel to maintain its own survival. You're learning to think this way too, calculating costs and benefits, weighing risks, making constant small decisions that in aggregate determine survival or failure. The cold hasn't killed you yet, but it's made its point clear. You're here on sufferance, maintaining a precarious bubble of warmth and function in a landscape that would freeze you solid given half a chance. Every engine that starts is a victory. Every intact finger is a gift. Every day without catastrophe is worth noting. And tomorrow you'll do it all again. The drive back to Mikhail's apartment as evening descends, though evening and afternoon are barely distinguishable in the perpetual twilight of Yakutian January, offers your first real look at transportation and movement across this frozen city. The streets of Yakutsk are unlike any roads you've experienced, and the vehicles navigating them employ strategies that would seem insane anywhere else but are simply necessary here. The road surface itself is remarkable. It's not asphalt in any meaningful sense, but rather layers upon layers of compacted ice and snow that have been accumulating since October. The city doesn't plow down to pavement anymore. That's pointless when new snow and ice form within hours. Instead, they compact it, creating an ice road that's sometimes smoother than summer asphalt. The thickness varies, but in some areas you're driving on ice that's 30 or 40 centimeters deep, polished by thousands of tires into a surface that's simultaneously slick and grippy, depending on temperature and traffic patterns. Ice road has advantages. Mikhail explains as he navigates through traffic moving at a cautious 40 kilometers per hour, despite the posted 60 kilometers per hour limit. Ice is smooth, no potholes. Potholes are summer problem when asphalt cracks. Ice is self-repairing, new snow fills any holes. And ice is consistent temperature, frozen solid, no melting, no refreezing, no dangerous conditions. As long as it stays below -20 degrees Celsius, ice roads are actually quite good. The danger comes during the transition seasons, late autumn and early spring, when temperatures hover around freezing and the ice road becomes unpredictable. But in the dead of winter, with temperatures locked at -50 degrees Celsius or below, the ice is diamond hard and stable. You can hear the squeak of tires on this cold ice, a distinctive sound that accompanies every vehicle. Traffic moves in a peculiar rhythm. No one accelerates quickly. Sudden acceleration on ice means spinning wheels and lost control. No one brakes hard. Locked wheels or ABS chattering means extended stopping distances. Everyone maintains generous following distances because stopping on ice from 40 kilometers per hour can take 50 meters or more. The entire traffic flow operates at a slow-motion pace that would infuriate drivers elsewhere but is pure survival instinct here. Mikhail points out various vehicles as you pass them, providing running commentary on their suitability for Yakutian conditions. That UAZ good vehicle, simple, Russian-made for Siberia, can fix anywhere. That Toyota Land Cruiser, also good, Japanese reliability, many parts available. That BMW, why bring BMW to Yakutsk? Is expensive, breaks constantly, no spare parts, owner is foolish. The BMW in question is indeed struggling. You can see it stalled at an intersection, hazard lights flashing, the driver standing beside it looking defeated. Probably fuel system froze, or turbo oil too thick, or electronics failed. Mikhail diagnoses without even stopping. Someone will come, tow to garage, repair costs thousands of rubles. Should have bought UAZ. The vehicle preference in Yakutsk has evolved through harsh natural selection. The survivors, the makes and models you see everywhere, are those that have proven themselves. UAZ, Russian military-style SUVs, old Ladas, Soviet-era sedans, Ural and Kamaz trucks, Soviet heavy vehicles, Toyota Land Cruisers, the only Japanese vehicles that have earned respect, and oddly, old Volkswagen vans from the 1970s and 80s, which the local German diaspora brought and maintained and which have developed a cult following for their simplicity and repairability. Modern vehicles with their complex emissions controls, turbos, direct injection, multiple computers, and sensitive electronics are considered liability rather than asset. In Yakutsk, we don't want innovation, Mikhail says. We want proven technology, simple systems, parts we can find. Give me carburetor over fuel injection, manual transmission over automatic, mechanical locks over electric. Everything electronic is weakness in cold. You pass a parking area where dozens of vehicles sit idling, their owners inside shops or offices, engines running to maintain operability. The collective rumble of all these running engines creates a background noise like distant thunder. The exhaust from hundreds of idling vehicles adds to the ice fog, creating a haze that hangs over the city like industrial smog. Except it's not pollution from factories, but simply the byproduct of keeping vehicles alive. The fuel consumption from this continuous idling is staggering. Mikhail estimates his truck burns about 100 liters of diesel per week just from idling, not counting actual driving. Multiply that by the thousands of vehicles in Yakutsk, and you realize the city consumes an enormous amount of fuel simply maintaining vehicle readiness. The environmental impact is significant. Yakutsk has some of the worst air quality in Russia during winter, not from industry but from traffic. Yet there's no practical alternative given current technology and infrastructure. Some buildings have heated parking garages, underground or enclosed heated spaces where vehicles can be parked with engines off. These are luxury accommodations, rented at premium prices, and even they require careful procedures. You cannot drive cold car into warm garage immediately, Mikhail explains. Sudden temperature change causes condensation. Moisture forms on cold metal, then freezes when you drive out again. Creates ice inside engine, in fuel tank, everywhere. Must warm car gradually, drive slowly to garage, let equalize. The heated garage problem has another dimension. Vehicles kept constantly warm develop rust and corrosion much faster than those kept constantly frozen. The temperature cycling, frozen outside, warm in garage, frozen outside again, creates condensation cycles that promote rust. Many Yakutians actually prefer to keep their vehicles frozen continuously, arguing that frozen metal doesn't rust. And they're not wrong. Rust is an electrochemical process that requires liquid water. Eliminate the liquid water by keeping everything below freezing, and you eliminate most rust. As you drive, Mikhail demonstrates the peculiar driving techniques required here. He never turns the steering wheel while stationary. That puts too much stress on cold, brittle steering components. He accelerates and decelerates gradually, working with the ice rather than fighting it. He takes corners at speeds that seem absurdly slow, but given the coefficient of friction on ice, about 0.1 compared to 0.7 on dry asphalt, those slow speeds are actually at the limit of adhesion. The trick is to be smooth, he says. No sudden moves, no surprises. Think like figure skater, not race car driver. Ice will forgive smooth mistakes, but punishes sudden movements. This philosophy extends to steering corrections. If the rear of the vehicle starts to slide, the correction is gentle and gradual, not the quick snapback you'd use on dry pavement. Traffic lights present interesting challenges. At intersections, vehicles often don't fully stop if no one's crossing. They slow to a near stop, check for traffic, and proceed. Coming to a complete stop on ice means you might not get moving again, your wheels spinning fruitlessly. Some intersections have sand or gravel spread across them specifically to improve traction for stopped vehicles trying to accelerate. The city's public transportation system operates under equally challenging conditions. Buses run continuously, never shutting off engines between routes. Drivers work shorter shifts because the cold is exhausting, and there are warming stations at major stops where drivers can take breaks. The buses themselves are specially modified, reinforced heaters, insulated bodies, double-paned windows, but they're still barely adequate. Passengers board knowing the bus might be cold, if the heater's struggling, knowing the ride will be slow, traffic moves cautiously, and knowing the bus might break down. It happens regularly. Mikhail points out a bus stop where 20 people are waiting, all in constant motion, stamping feet, rotating positions to take turns blocking wind for those behind them. See how they group? That is survival strategy, human windbreak. People in back get benefit of those in front blocking wind, and they rotate positions so everyone gets chance to be in warmer spot. Is like penguin huddle, yes? Same principle. The social contract around vehicles in Yakutsk is different from elsewhere. If you see a stranded motorist, you stop, not out of extraordinary kindness, but because next time it might be you, and you'd want someone to stop. If someone needs a jump start, you provide it. If someone's out of fuel, you share yours. The cold enforces cooperation because the alternative is death. There's even a semi-organized system of warm spots. Businesses that allow stranded motorists to wait inside while help arrives. Gas stations, shops, cafes. Many display small signs indicating their warm spots, and refusing entry to someone in genuine need of shelter from cold is considered deeply shameful. Historians note that this tradition predates Soviet times, rooted in nomadic Siberian cultures where hospitality wasn't optional but essential for collective survival. The parking situation around apartments and businesses is anarchic by Western standards but perfectly logical here. Vehicles park on sidewalks, in front of doorways, wherever they can maintain engine operation and access to fuel. Parking enforcement is minimal in winter. Police understand that optimal parking arrangement is less important than surviving the cold. Come spring, the rules tighten, but during winter, pragmatism overrides regulation. Mikhail pulls up to his building. Engine will remain running, of course, and you notice he's positioned the truck close to an electrical outlet mounted on a post. This is engine block heater outlet, he explains. Some nights, when it's very cold, I plug in heater to help keep engine warm, reduce fuel consumption from idling. Not all nights, electricity is expensive. But when temperature drops below -65, I plug in. The electrical grid in Yakutsk carries tremendous load during winter from these block heaters, supplemental building heaters, and increased lighting during long darkness. Before heading inside, Mikhail performs his evening vehicle check. Oil level, checking dipstick even though engine is hot, because oil consumption increases in cold. Coolant level, tire pressure, which drops significantly in cold, battery connections, and a visual inspection underneath for any leaks or damage. This takes 5 minutes, and it's a ritual performed by every vehicle owner daily. You catch small problem early, fix easily, he says. You ignore small problem, becomes big problem, maybe total failure. The topic turns to the most extreme solution for vehicle survival: the heated garage with pit. Mikhail doesn't have one. They're expensive to build and maintain, but he shows you a photo on his phone of his friend's setup. It's essentially a small building with a pit underneath where the vehicle parks, creating a climate-controlled environment. The vehicle can be shut off, and repairs can be performed in relative comfort. These garages are heated to just above freezing, not warm but warm enough, and represent the ultimate in Yakutian vehicle care. My friend, he has 3 cars, Mikhail says with obvious envy. Keeps them in heated garage, rotates which one he drives. When one needs maintenance, he parks it, drives another. This is luxury living. He can actually turn off engines, save fuel, extend vehicle life. But garage costs maybe what entire car costs every year to heat. Is for rich people, not for mechanics. The conversation shifts to rural areas outside Yakutsk, where vehicle challenges multiply exponentially. The ice roads connecting villages are maintained irregularly, can be blocked by snowdrifts, and offer no services or shelter. Breaking down on a rural ice road in winter is genuinely life-threatening. Drivers carry extensive emergency supplies, sleeping bags rated to minus 60 degrees Celsius, weeks' worth of food, satellite phones, fuel for heating, emergency beacons. I have cousin in village, 200 kilometers north, Mikhail says. He drives to Yakutsk maybe 4 times per winter. Each trip, he tells family exact route, exact time, has check-in schedule. If he doesn't check in, family knows to send help. 2 years ago, his truck broke down halfway, minus 63 outside. He burned almost all his emergency fuel staying warm, was rescued after 8 hours. If he had not prepared properly, if help had not come, he would die. These rural journeys are not casual day trips but expeditions requiring planning comparable to polar exploration. Some villages become completely inaccessible during the coldest months, cut off except by air, their populations enduring until the ice roads become passable again. The Soviet policy of settling Siberia created these isolated communities, and now their residents cope with the consequences. Extreme isolation, limited access to supplies and medical care, and the constant risk of vehicle failure meaning death. Even in Yakutsk proper, the sense of isolation is palpable. The city is about 5,000 kilometers from Moscow, connected by a road, the M56 Kolyma Highway, known as the Road of Bones, because it was built by Gulag prisoners whose bodies were incorporated into the roadbed, that's only fully passable in winter when rivers freeze and can be crossed. In summer, the road becomes intermittent, often impassable mud. Air travel is expensive and weather-dependent. The sense of being at the edge of the world, cut off from civilization, is not paranoia but geography. As you finally head inside, the nightly ritual of vehicle positioning complete, Mikhail makes a philosophical observation. Transportation in Yakutsk is not convenience, is lifeline. Vehicle is not luxury, is survival tool. You think about this different than people in warm places. They drive car to be comfortable, to save time. We drive car to stay alive, to maintain connection to outside world, to access food and medical care. Is different mentality. This mentality extends to vehicle maintenance. Where drivers elsewhere might defer an oil change or ignore a minor noise, Yakutian drivers are hypervigilant. That minor noise could be a bearing failing, and that bearing failure could strand you in lethal cold. That deferred oil change could mean thicker oil, harder starting, engine failure. The stakes are higher, so the attention to maintenance is proportionally greater. Yet despite all precautions, vehicles fail. The city has a robust towing industry, trucks that run continuously, ready to respond to breakdowns. There are mobile repair services that come to you. There's an informal network of mechanics who make house calls. The infrastructure exists because it must. The failure rate of vehicles in these conditions is so high that the support systems are essential rather than optional. By the time you're back in Mikhail's warm apartment, having navigated the icy stairs and gone through the airlock of the cold stairwell, you're exhausted. Not from physical exertion, you've barely walked, but from the constant mental load of cold awareness, the calculations of risk and exposure, the monitoring of clothing and temperature and time. Mikhail puts on tea, as always, and you sit in the warm kitchen while outside his truck continues running. burning fuel to maintain its readiness, joining the chorus of thousands of other running engines across the city. The sound is so constant you're learning to tune it out. The background rumble of civilization maintaining its fragile presence in a place that would rather freeze everything solid. Tomorrow, Mikhail says, I show you community life, how people maintain sanity in cold and darkness. You think transportation is interesting? Wait until you see how Yakutians socialize, how they stay human when environment tries to make them machines of survival. You sip your tea and consider this. You've seen the physical challenges, outhouse, morning routines, food systems, body stress, mechanical problems, transportation nightmares. But the psychological challenges, the human element of enduring this for months on end, that's a dimension you haven't fully explored yet. Outside, the temperature is dropping as night deepens. The thermometer visible from the window reads -64 degrees Celsius and falling. Somewhere in the city, someone's vehicle is failing. Somewhere, someone's pipes are freezing. Somewhere, someone is making the terrible choice between staying in a cold apartment or venturing into the lethal night. But also somewhere, people are gathering, laughing, sharing warmth and food and stories. Because if you can't find human connection in the frozen darkness, you go insane. And Yakutians, for all their hardness, have learned to be human in the most inhuman conditions. That's tomorrow's lesson. Tonight, you just want to be warm, fed, and grateful your bladder isn't yet insisting on another outhouse visit. Small victories, they accumulate. Your fourth day in Yakutsk begins with a revelation. You've started to adapt. Not physically. Your body is still struggling. Your face still bears the red marks of minor frostbite. Your fingers still ache from repeated cold exposure. But psychologically, you're learning the rhythm of life here, the constant calculations, the acceptance of discomfort as baseline rather than emergency. This, Mikhail tells you over morning tea, is the beginning of understanding how community and culture survive in conditions designed to isolate and defeat human connection. Today is Saturday, he announces. No work. Today I show you how Yakutians stay sane, how we build community when walking across street to neighbor's house is dangerous expedition. You will see, we are not just surviving, we are living. The first stop is unexpected. A public bathhouse, a banya, located 3 blocks from Mikhail's apartment. The banya tradition is deeply Russian, but in Yakutsk it takes on dimensions beyond cultural practice. It becomes psychological necessity, physical therapy, and social gathering all compressed into one steamy, hot experience. The building is unremarkable from outside, squat, well-insulated, trailing impressive amounts of steam from vents. Inside, it's divided into men's and women's sections, each with changing rooms, washing areas, and the steam rooms themselves. The heat hits you immediately upon entering. Plus 25 degrees Celsius in the changing room, plus 40 degrees Celsius in the washing area, and the steam room, the actual banya, runs at plus 80 degrees Celsius to plus 100 degrees Celsius with high humidity. The temperature differential from outside to the steam room is approximately 160 degrees Celsius. This is not a typo. You're going from minus 60 degrees Celsius to plus 100 degrees Celsius, from frozen solid to hot enough to cook food. The physical shock to your system is extraordinary, and Mikhail warns you to acclimate gradually. People have heart attacks from rapid temperature change, he says seriously. Especially older people, people with heart problems. Must be careful. Take time. Listen to your body. The social aspect of the banya is immediately apparent. The changing room is full of men. Old, young, fat, thin, scarred, tattooed, in various states of undress, all greeting each other with the easy familiarity of regular attendees. Mikhail seems to know everyone, exchanging jokes, commenting on someone's new boots, asking about someone else's son. This is clearly a community hub, a weekly ritual where social bonds are maintained. You follow Mikhail through the process. Undress completely, rinse with warm water, then enter the steam room for a brief first session, maybe 5 minutes, to let your body adjust. The heat is intense but not painful, the humidity making every breath feel thick and substantial. Your frozen sinuses immediately begin to drain. Your cold compressed muscles start to relax, and you feel your blood vessels dilating with an almost audible whoosh. This is why banya is essential in Yakutia, Mikhail explains, voice echoing in the tiled room. For 7 months, we are always cold, always contracted, body always tight and stressed. Banya reverses this, expands vessels, relaxes muscles, clears lungs, resets nervous system. Is not luxury, is medicine. The medical benefits of heat exposure in extreme cold climates are well documented. Regular sauna use in Scandinavia and Russia has been linked to improved cardiovascular health, reduced respiratory infections, and better mental health outcomes. In Yakutia specifically, the banya serves as treatment for cold-related stress, a way to reverse the constant vasoconstriction and muscle tension that extreme cold imposes. Between steam sessions, you do multiple rounds, gradually increasing duration. You plunge into a cold pool. Not frozen, but cold, maybe plus 10 degrees Celsius. The shock is intense but brief, and it triggers a massive endorphin release. After days of being slowly chilled to your core, the voluntary cold immersion followed by return to heat creates a euphoria that's almost narcotic. You understand now why Yakutians are devoted to the banya. It's the only time their bodies feel truly warm, truly relaxed, truly loose. The social dynamic continues throughout. Men chat between sessions, discussing everything from local politics to vehicle problems to family gossip. There's a leveling effect to communal nudity. You can't tell who's wealthy and who's struggling when everyone's naked and sweating. A business owner sits next to a factory worker, a teacher alongside a mechanic, all equal in the steam. Mikhail introduces you to Sergei, an older man, maybe 70, with a body that's a roadmap of cold weather injuries. Missing toes, scarred hands, a nose that's clearly been reconstructed after severe frostbite. He's a retired geologist who spent 40 years prospecting in the Yakutian wilderness, living in conditions even more extreme than the city. He speaks no English, but through Mikhail's translation, he tells stories that make your experiences seem trivial. He says his team once was trapped in tent for 11 days during blizzard, minus 72 outside, couldn't leave tent or would die, Mikhail translates. They burned everything they could for heat, wooden equipment, part of their sled, even their spare boots. They ate frozen seal meat raw because couldn't melt ice for water fast enough. When blizzard cleared, 3 of 7 men had severe frostbite. 1 lost both feet, another lost hands. 1 lost his mind from trauma and never recovered. Sergei shrugs as he tells this, as if it's merely an interesting anecdote rather than a horror story. This casualness about extreme suffering is common among older Yakutians, particularly those who worked in mining, geology, or construction during Soviet times. The labor camps, the forced settlements, the impossible working conditions, these created a population with trauma tolerance that's almost superhuman. Historians still debate the psychological legacy of Soviet-era Siberian development, whether the high rates of alcoholism and mental health issues represent intergenerational trauma or ongoing response to harsh conditions. After the banya, which lasts about 2 hours total, you emerge feeling simultaneously exhausted and energized. Your skin is pink, your muscles are loose, and you feel warmer than you've felt since arriving. This feeling lasts maybe 4 to 6 hours, Mikhail says. Then cold returns, body tightens again. This is why we go to banya every week, sometimes twice per week. Is maintenance like maintaining car engine. The next stop is a community center, a Soviet-era building that serves multiple functions. Meeting hall, classroom space, gymnasium, and social club. Today, there's a children's ice sculpture competition happening outside. Yes, outside, in minus 58 degrees Celsius weather, where families have gathered to watch kids and teenagers create art from blocks of ice. The sculptures are impressive. Animals, buildings, abstract shapes, all carved from the abundant raw material of frozen water. The young artists work in shifts, 15 minutes of carving, 15 minutes inside warming up, using chisels, files, even chainsaws for the larger pieces. Their breath creates personal ice fogs, and the ice chips from their carving spray across the work area like glittering snow. You watch a teenage girl, maybe 16, working on an intricate sculpture of a horse, the detail remarkable. She works with intense focus, fingers clumsy in thick gloves, face wrapped except for her eyes. Every few minutes, She steps back to assess her progress, blowing warm breath onto her mittens before diving back into the work. When her 15-minute shift ends, she reluctantly heads inside, replaced by what appears to be her younger brother, who continues working on the same piece. This is tradition, Mikhail explains. In winter, when darkness is long and cold is harsh, we create beauty. Reminds us we are human, not just survival machines. Ice sculpture, ice architecture, even ice music, you can make instruments from ice. Sounds are very pure. Indeed, there's a small stage where musicians are preparing for an evening performance using instruments carved from ice. Xylophone-like slabs of ice that ring when struck, ice drums, even an ice violin of sorts. The instruments won't last long in the warm indoor air, so performances are brief and precious. The community center inside is crowded with families. The atmosphere festive despite the killing cold outside. There's hot tea, of course, and food. People have brought blini, pirozhki, homemade pastries. Children run around with the boundless energy of youth, while parents socialize in clusters, and elderly residents sit in honored positions near the heaters. You notice the elders are treated with particular respect, their stories and advice actively sought. In a place where survival depends on accumulated knowledge, where the difference between life and death can be a remembered technique or a passed-down strategy, elders aren't sidelined but treasured. They're living libraries of cold-weather wisdom, repositories of techniques developed over lifetimes. Mikhail introduces you to his grandmother, Babushka, a tiny woman who must be 80 but claims to be only 75, maybe 76. She grips your hand with surprising strength and delivers a long speech in rapid-fire Russian that Mikhail translates in abbreviated form. She says you have soft hands, city hands, not working hands. She says this means you have not truly suffered yet, which is good. Suffering is not goal. She says when hands become hard, life becomes slightly easier, but only slightly. She says drink more tea, eat more fat, and find a wife because warmth is better shared. The grandmother's assessment is accurate. Your hands are indeed soft compared to the calloused, scarred hands of people who've worked in the cold for decades. But her broader point resonates. There's a physical toughening that happens over time, a literal thickening of skin, building of calluses, adaptation of nerve endings that makes cold exposure marginally more bearable. You're weeks away from that kind of adaptation, at minimum, years more likely. The social fabric here is tighter than in warmer climates by necessity. People know their neighbors not casually but intimately, because in an emergency, your neighbors might be your only help. There are formal and informal mutual aid networks. If one family's heating fails, others take them in. If someone needs to borrow fuel, it's provided with the understanding of eventual reciprocity. If a vehicle breaks down, help materializes. This cooperative ethic isn't unique to Yakutia. It exists in harsh environments worldwide, but the stakes here make it non-optional. The indigenous Saka people, who've inhabited this region for over 1,000 years, developed sophisticated social structures around mutual support. Extended family networks, clan obligations, seasonal gatherings that reinforced social bonds. Modern Yakutians, whether ethnically Saka or Russian or other groups, have largely adopted these same structures because they work. The conversation at the community center inevitably turns to politics and economics, though you understand little without translation. Mikhail summarizes, people are discussing the latest government promises about infrastructure improvements, the rising cost of fuel and heating, the closing of a local school due to population decline. Young people leave, he says with resigned sadness. They go to Moscow, St. Petersburg, anywhere warmer. Yakutsk's population is slowly shrinking, very slowly, as young people choose easier life elsewhere. Cannot blame them, but also cannot judge those who stay. This demographic pressure is real and measurable. Yakutsk's population peaked in the 1990s and has been slowly declining since, despite birth rates that are higher than the Russian average. The outmigration of young, educated people is a brain drain that threatens the long-term viability of the city. Yet those who remain express a fierce pride in their choice, a sense that they're maintaining something important, a human presence in the harshest inhabited place on Earth. The afternoon shifts to a more intimate gathering. Mikhail takes you to his sister's apartment for a family meal. The apartment is similar to Mikhail's. Small, warm, slightly cluttered with the accumulated stuff of life. His sister, Natasha, is cooking in the tiny kitchen, producing an astonishing amount of food from limited space. The menu is traditional: horse meat stroganina, fried fish, salamat, pickled vegetables, black bread, and inevitably vodka. The extended family arrives: Natasha's husband, their 2 children, teenagers, Mikhail's parents, both in their 60s, an uncle, a cousin. The small apartment becomes crowded, warm from body heat and cooking, loud with conversation and laughter. This gathering, you learn, happens weekly, rotating between family members' homes, maintaining connections that might otherwise fray in the isolating cold. The meal is leisurely, lasting hours, with multiple toasts and rounds of vodka. The toasts follow tradition, first to health, then to family, then to friends, then increasingly personal and specific. Mikhail's father toasts to our foreign guest who has been brave enough to experience real winter, which earns applause and requires you to down your shot. Natasha's husband toasts to vehicles that start in the morning, which gets knowing laughs and another round. Between toasts, food is consumed in quantities that would be excessive in normal climates, but here is merely adequate. The stroganina disappears rapidly, everyone knowing the technique of eating it frozen. The fried fish, whole small fish, crispy and salty, is eaten bones and all. The salamat, that dense flour and cream porridge, sits heavy and satisfying in your stomach. The vodka flows, but you notice the consumption is controlled, measured. No one gets drunk. Getting drunk in Yakutsk winter is dangerous, as loss of judgment can lead to exposure, accidents, bad decisions. The vodka serves to warm, to facilitate conversation, to mark the occasion, but not to intoxicate. This disciplined approach to alcohol is common among functional Yakutian households, though Mikhail acknowledges that problem drinking exists. Some people, they cannot stop, he says quietly. They drink to forget cold, to forget darkness, to forget difficulty of life. Then they freeze to death because they pass out outside, or they lose job because they are always drunk, or they destroy family. Is sad, but is reality. The conversation around the table covers everything: family news, community gossip, complaints about government, memories of past winters. Mikhail's mother tells stories of her childhood in a village even more remote than Yakutsk, where they had no electricity until the 1970s, where outhouses were the only option year-round, where medical care meant a 3-day journey in winter. "You young people think this is hard," she says, gesturing vaguely at the comfortable apartment. "You don't know hard. We had hard. This is luxury." This generational perspective is common, each generation believing the previous one suffered more, and they're probably right. Life in Yakutia has gradually improved over decades. Better housing, better heating, better vehicles, better access to goods. What was nearly unsurvivable in the 1950s is merely difficult now. But merely difficult is still beyond what most humans would choose to endure. As evening deepens, which means the weak twilight fades to complete darkness by 4 p.m., the family gathering continues. The children show you their schoolwork, proud of their English homework that they want you to check. Natasha's husband shows photos from a summer camping trip, and the contrast is startling. Images of green forests, flowing rivers, flowers, and mosquitoes, which in Yakutian summer are legendary in their abundance and ferocity. For a moment, you can't reconcile these summer images with the frozen wasteland outside. Yes, it's hard to believe, but in summer Yakutsk is beautiful, Mikhail says, scrolling through more photos. Temperature reaches plus 30 degrees Celsius, sometimes plus 35 degrees Celsius. Very hot. Rivers thaw, ice disappears. Everything is green and growing. Only problem is mosquitoes, and permafrost melting makes everything muddy. But is beautiful, alive, warm. People who only see winter think Yakutsk is hell. People who see summer understand why we stay. This seasonal transformation is dramatic. Yakutsk has one of the largest temperature ranges of any city on Earth, from minus 72 degrees Celsius, historical record, to plus 38 degrees Celsius, summer record, a span of 110 degrees. The annual rhythm is extremity followed by extremity, with only brief transition periods. Spring is a chaotic mess of melting ice, flooding, and mud. Autumn is a rapid descent into cold. But summer is a burst of intense life, compressed growth, flowers and insects and activity all crammed into 3 short months before the freeze returns. As the family meal winds down and you prepare to leave, the journey back to Mikhail's apartment is only 3 blocks but still requires full cold weather gear and mental preparation. You're struck by what you've witnessed today. The banya, the ice sculpture competition, the community center gathering, the family meal. All of these are strategies for maintaining humanity in inhuman conditions. They're not luxuries or entertainment. They're survival tools as essential as insulated boots and running vehicles. Isolation is deadly, not just physically but psychologically. The darkness, the cold, the constant stress of survival, these would drive people insane without social connection. Mikhail's grandmother, that tiny fierce woman with the strong grip, pulls you aside before you leave and says something that Mikhail translates. She says the cold can freeze your body, but loneliness freezes your soul. She says community is our second fur coat, worn on the inside, keeping the heart warm when everything else is frozen. The walk back to Mikhail's apartment in the dark, in the minus 60 degrees Celsius cold, is easier than it would have been days ago. Not because the cold has changed, it's still lethal, but because you've changed. You know the procedures now. Move efficiently, breathe through the scarf, don't touch metal, get inside quickly. You know the rhythm of exposure and recovery, the calculations of risk, the acceptance that discomfort is standard. Back in the warm apartment, Mikhail makes tea, always tea, and you sit in the kitchen while the city rumbles with its thousands of idling engines, its hundreds of thousands of residents all doing their own versions of what you've done today. Gathering, connecting, maintaining the social fabric that makes survival bearable. You see now, Mikhail says, Yakutians are not tough because we enjoy suffering. We are tough because we must be, and we stay human because we help each other stay human. Cold tries to make us isolated, tries to make us quit, tries to make us leave. We refuse. This is our home. We stay, we endure, we live, not just survive, but live. This is victory over cold. Outside, the thermometer reads minus 61 degrees Celsius. Inside, you're warm, fed, socially connected, and beginning to understand that the greatest achievement of Yakutsk isn't the infrastructure or the technology or the adaptation. It's the preservation of community, the maintenance of human connection, in a place that shouldn't have humans at all. And tomorrow, you'll learn why anyone would choose to stay in this place, what draws people here or keeps them here despite every rational reason to leave. Because there must be reasons, and they must be powerful, to justify making your home in hell's freezer. Your final full day in Yakutsk begins with a question you've been afraid to ask, because the answer might reveal something uncomfortable about human nature or economics or stubbornness that you're not ready to confront. Why? Why do nearly 1 million people choose to live here? Why did they come, and more importantly, why do they stay? Mikhail has been expecting this question. Today, he says over morning tea, the ritual that now feels as essential as breathing, I show you the why. You will understand, or maybe you won't, maybe no outsider can truly understand. But I show you. The first answer is written in the earth itself. Diamonds. Yakutia sits atop some of the world's richest diamond deposits, discovered in the 1950s and developed into massive mining operations that transformed the region from remote backwater into economically significant territory. Mikhail drives you to the outskirts of Yakutsk, where you can see the road leading toward Murny, home of the Mir mine. An open-pit diamond mine so enormous it's visible from space. A perfect circular hole in the earth over 500 meters deep and 1,200 meters across. Stalin sent geologists here in 1940s. Mikhail explains as you look toward the distant mining region. He knew there must be diamonds, similar geology to South African diamond fields. He sent prisoners, geologists, workers to find them. Many died from cold, from starvation, from work conditions. But they found diamonds. Huge deposits, some of richest in world. Suddenly, Yakutia is important to Moscow. Suddenly, resources flow in, cities built, people brought here, some voluntary, some not. The diamond industry transformed Yakutia's economy. What was once subsistence living for indigenous Saka people and exile territory for political prisoners became strategically valuable. Towns were built, infrastructure developed, and workers arrived, some attracted by high wages, hazard pay for extreme conditions, some assigned by Soviet labor distribution systems, some from the Gulag system that used prisoner labor extensively in Siberian development. My grandfather, he came as geologist in 1955. Mikhail continues. Young man from Ukraine, recruited with promises of adventure and good salary. He thought would stay 5 years, make money, go home. But then he met my grandmother, Saka woman from local village, and he stayed. 50 years he lived here, until he died at 78. Never went back to Ukraine, not even once. This pattern repeated thousands of times. People came temporarily and stayed permanently, whether from love, inertia, economic entrapment, or genuine attachment to the place. The Soviet system discouraged migration away from strategically important areas, but even after the USSR collapsed and movement became free, many people stayed. Their reasons are complex and individual, but common themes emerge. The second answer is economic. Yakutia pays. Workers in extreme conditions receive significant salary bonuses, northern coefficients that can double or triple base wages. Miners, in particular, earn salaries that would be unimaginable elsewhere in Russia for their skill levels. A truck driver in a diamond mine might earn 5 times what a truck driver in Moscow earns. This wage premium attracts workers and, crucially, keeps them. You work in mine for 10, 15 years, save money, you can retire at 50 and live comfortably, Mikhail says. Many people have this plan. Endure cold for working years, then retire to warm region, Crimea, Caucasus, somewhere with sun. But what happens? You get used to high salary, you buy apartment here, your children are here, your friends are here. Leaving becomes harder than staying. So you stay, and you tell yourself you'll leave next year, but next year never comes. This economic trap is well documented in resource extraction regions worldwide. High wages compensate for harsh conditions, but those high wages create lifestyle dependencies that make leaving difficult. People upgrade their vehicles, their apartments, their standard of living to match their income. Moving to a warmer climate means accepting lower wages and lower living standards, a difficult psychological transition. Mikhail takes you to meet Alexei, a diamond mine worker on his week off. Mines run 2 weeks on, 1 week off schedules to manage worker fatigue. Alexei is in his 40s, muscular, weathered, with the look of someone who spent decades in harsh conditions. His apartment is noticeably nicer than Mikhail's, larger, better furnished, with expensive electronics and a garage space for his Hilux truck. I came from Novosibirsk in 2001, Alexei says, his English surprisingly good. Was young, stupid, wanted adventure and money. Thought I stay 5 years. Is now 24 years. I own apartment here, have good salary, have respect in community. In Novosibirsk, I would be nobody working in factory for small wage. Here I am somebody. This is worth the cold. This status dimension is significant. In the hierarchy of Russian society, Yakutian workers, particularly miners, occupy a position of respect. They're seen as tough, essential, brave for enduring conditions that others won't. This social capital has value that can't be measured purely in rubles. Alexei describes returning to Novosibirsk for a visit and feeling like an outsider, soft compared to his memories, no longer fitting in the place he once called home. Yakutsk is home now, he says simply. Is my home, even though is crazy place to live. I know every street, I know people, I know rules of survival. Moving somewhere else would be like starting over, and I am too old to start over. The third answer is cultural identity, particularly for the indigenous Saka people. Mikhail arranges a visit to a cultural center where you meet Sardana, a Saka woman in her 30s who works as a teacher of traditional Saka language and customs. She's dressed in traditional clothing, an elaborate costume of leather, fur, and beadwork, for a cultural demonstration scheduled later. For Saka people, this is ancestral land, she explains through Mikhail's translation. Our people have lived here for over 1,000 years, adapting to cold, developing way of life that works. To leave would be to abandon identity, to become refugees in our own country. We stay because this is who we are. The Saka people, also called Yakuts, number about 500,000, nearly half of Yakutia's population. They speak a Turkic language distinct from Russian, maintain cultural practices around horse breeding and subsistence hunting, and have religious traditions that blend shamanism with Orthodox Christianity. For them, Yakutia isn't just a difficult place to live. It's home in the deepest sense, tied to identity and ancestry. Sardana shows you artifacts in the cultural center, traditional clothing designed for -70 degrees Celsius conditions, tools for ice fishing and hunting, ceremonial objects used in Saka festivals. Our ancestors solved the problems of extreme cold centuries before Soviet engineers came, she says with obvious pride. They knew how to construct dwellings that stayed warm, how to breed horses that survived winter, how to preserve food in permafrost, how to navigate by stars during long darkness. This knowledge is our heritage. Historians studying Saka culture note remarkable technological achievements. Winter dwellings that used multiple layers of insulation and central heating from large stoves, storage techniques that utilized permafrost as natural refrigeration, clothing systems that rivaled modern cold weather gear in effectiveness. The Saka weren't merely surviving in Yakutia, they were thriving, with populations that were healthy and well-fed according to early Russian accounts from the 17th century. Soviet times were difficult for Saka people. Sardana continues. Stalin forced collectivization, took our horses, disrupted traditional way of life, punished shamanic practices, tried to erase language. Many suffered, many died. But we survived, we adapted. Now we are reviving traditions, teaching children Saka language, preserving culture. To leave Yakutia would mean letting Stalin's policies succeed posthumously. We refuse this. We stay, we persist, we reclaim our heritage. This cultural persistence is visible throughout Yakutsk. You see Saka language on public signs alongside Russian, hear it spoken in shops and streets, see traditional designs incorporated into modern architecture. The Saka ethnic identity has strengthened post-Soviet collapse, not weakened, as people seek connection to indigenous roots after decades of forced Russification. The fourth answer is perverse psychology. Some people genuinely like it here. This seems impossible given everything you've experienced. The cold, the darkness, the constant difficulty. But Mikhail introduces you to people who express sincere affection for Yakutsk. I tried living in Moscow for 2 years, says Vera, a journalist in her 50s. Was warm, was civilized, had culture and restaurants and everything I thought I wanted. But I was miserable. Too crowded, too fast, too fake. People don't look at each other, don't help each other, don't share anything real. In Yakutsk, we are genuine. We have to be, can't fake your way through -65 weather. I came back, felt like coming home, felt like I could breathe again. This preference for Yakutian life sounds like Stockholm Syndrome, but it's more nuanced. Some people genuinely thrive in extreme environments, finding purpose and meaning in the challenge. The simplification of life that extreme cold enforces, you have clear priorities, clear dangers, clear measures of success, can be psychologically satisfying compared to the ambiguous complexities of modern urban life elsewhere. Igor, a photographer who documents Yakutian life, puts it differently. Where else can you see beauty like this? He shows you his portfolio on a laptop. Stunning images of ice fog glowing in streetlights, frost patterns on windows like natural art, the aurora borealis dancing over frozen landscapes, ice sculptures catching sunset light, people's faces emerging from fur hoods with expressions of determination and joy. This place is visually unique. The light, the ice, the atmosphere is nowhere else like this on Earth. As artist, how can I leave? The aesthetic argument is surprisingly common among creative people in Yakutsk. The extreme conditions create visual phenomena. Ice fog, frost architecture, crystalline atmospheric effects that are genuinely beautiful and genuinely unique. The long darkness, rather than being purely negative, creates lighting conditions that photographers and filmmakers find extraordinary. Winter nights with full moon and ice fog create an otherworldly luminescence that has to be seen to be believed. The fifth answer is darker. Some people are trapped. Mikhail is careful how he phrases this, but the reality exists. Some residents lack resources to relocate. Moving is expensive. Starting over elsewhere requires capital and connections. Some are tied to family members who can't or won't leave. Some have criminal records or personal histories that make relocation difficult. Some are simply psychologically unable to make major life changes. Not everyone here is here by choice. Not really, Mikhail admits. Some people, they stay because leaving is harder than staying, even though staying is killing them slowly, through alcoholism, through depression, through just grinding down of will to live. Is sad, but is reality. Every city has people who are stuck. In Yakutsk, being stuck feels more dramatic because conditions are more dramatic. The mental health statistics support this darker view. Yakutia has higher than average rates of alcoholism, depression, and suicide compared to Russia overall, and Russia's rates are already concerning. The combination of extreme cold, prolonged darkness, social isolation, and economic stress creates psychological pressures that not everyone can withstand. The healthcare system struggles to provide adequate mental health services across such a vast region. Yet there's a sixth answer that ties all the others together: defiant pride. Yakutians, whether ethnically Sakha, Russian, or the many other groups that make up the region's diverse population, share a sense of having accomplished something remarkable simply by living here. There's pride in enduring what others cannot, pride in making civilization work in impossible conditions, pride in the toughness and resourcefulness that Yakutian life demands. When I travel to other places in Russia, people ask where I'm from, Mikhail says. When I say Yakutsk, they respect me immediately. They know Yakutsk is hardest place, coldest place, most extreme place. They know living there means something. I am not just mechanic, I am Yakutian mechanic, which means I fix cars in minus 70 degrees Celsius and I survive. This gives identity, gives purpose, gives meaning, is worth something. This pride extends to collective identity. Yakutsk residents will complain endlessly about the cold, the infrastructure problems, the cost of living, the isolation, but let an outsider criticize Yakutsk, and they become defensive. Is our city, our frozen hell, and we love it even while we hate it, Mikhail says with a laugh. Is complicated relationship. As your final day progresses, Mikhail takes you to one last location. A viewpoint on the edge of the city, looking out over the frozen Lena River and the expanse of Yakutian wilderness beyond. The temperature is minus 63 degrees Celsius. The sky is clear, and the sun, weak and low on the horizon, casts orange light across a landscape of white and gray and shadow. This is what people don't understand, Mikhail says, his voice muffled by his scarf. They see numbers, temperature, latitude, darkness hours, and they think is only suffering. But they miss this. He gestures at the vista before you. Is beautiful in its way, is pure, untouched, real, is place where nature still dominates, where human presence is fragile and temporary, where you remember you are small part of something larger. The landscape is indeed beautiful, though it's a harsh, unforgiving beauty. The ice fog hangs in layers over the river valley, creating ethereal effects as weak sunlight filters through. The city behind you rises on its stilts, trailing steam from thousands of heating pipes, looking like an industrial mirage. The wilderness beyond stretches endlessly, white and frozen and sublime in its indifference to human concerns. We stay because leaving would feel like defeat, Mikhail concludes. We stay because this is home, for all its difficulties. We stay because someone must witness this place, must maintain human presence at edge of survivability, must prove that humans can endure anything. We stay because leaving would mean admitting that cold wins, that difficulty wins, that nature wins. And we refuse to admit this. So we stay, we endure, we live. You stand in the killing cold, feeling it seep through all your layers, feeling your body burning calories desperately to maintain core temperature, and you think about the million people who've chosen this. Some for diamonds, some for money, some for culture, some for beauty, some because they're stuck, but all united by the daily negotiation with extreme cold, the constant small victories over an environment that wants them gone. Mikhail checks his watch. You've been outside for 6 minutes, approaching the safe exposure limit, and gestures toward the truck. Time to return to warmth, to safety, to the fragile bubble of civilization that Yakutsk represents. As you drive back through the city, you see it differently now. Not just as a collection of buildings and vehicles and infrastructure, but as a monument to human stubbornness, adaptability, and will. Every running engine is a small victory. Every heated apartment is a triumph over thermodynamics. Every person walking down the street is making a choice, conscious or unconscious, to persist in a place that would rather freeze them solid. Your time in Yakutsk is ending. Tomorrow you'll leave. Grateful to leave. Relieved to return to warmth and ease and civilization that doesn't require constant vigilance. But you'll leave with respect for those who stay, who make their lives here, who find meaning and purpose and even joy in conditions that would break most people. Mikhail pulls up to his apartment building, engine still running as always, and turns to you with a grin. So, you want to move to Yakutsk now? You see advantages, yes? He's joking, but there's a genuine question underneath. Do you understand why people stay? You do understand, at least intellectually. The reasons are complex, layered, individual, and collective. Economic incentive, cultural identity, aesthetic appreciation, perverse psychology, defiant pride. All mixing together into motivations that make sense even when they shouldn't. I understand, you tell Mikhail. I don't agree. I still think you're all slightly insane, but I understand. He laughs. A sound that's become familiar and comforting. Slightly insane, yes, this is accurate assessment. Must be slightly insane to live in Yakutsk. But is good kind of insane, useful insane, insane that keeps you alive and human in place designed to kill and dehumanize. We embrace our insanity. That night, your last in Yakutsk, you lie in your sleeping bag in Mikhail's spare room and think about everything you've experienced. The outhouse terror, the morning rituals, the frozen food markets, the physical assault of cold, the Soviet infrastructure, the transportation nightmares, the community resilience, and now the complex reasons people stay. It's been a week that feels like a month, compressed intensity of experience that's changed how you think about human limits and adaptability. Outside, the city rumbles with its thousands of running engines, its heating systems fighting entropy, its population of nearly 1 million souls maintaining their precarious presence at minus 65 degrees Celsius. The thermometer on the window reads minus 66 degrees Celsius and falling. Tomorrow will be colder still. But tomorrow you won't be here. Tomorrow you'll be in transit, moving toward warmth, toward places where going to the bathroom doesn't require existential courage, where fingers stay attached without constant vigilance, where survival isn't the baseline achievement. You'll miss it, though. Not the cold, never the cold, but the clarity it brings, the way it strips life down to essentials, the community forged in shared suffering, the pride of enduring. These things exist in Yakutsk in forms that can't be replicated in comfortable climates. As sleep finally comes, your last conscious thought is gratitude. Gratitude that you experienced this place, gratitude that you survived it, and gratitude, most of all, that you don't have to stay. The cold continues its siege. The city continues its resistance. And somewhere, someone's bladder is informing them that the outhouse awaits. That choice must be made. That another small negotiation with the frozen darkness is required. Welcome to Yakutia, where simply existing is victory, where every morning you wake with all your fingers and toes is cause for celebration, where the cold tries to defeat you and you refuse again and again, for years or decades or lifetimes. Some call it hell. The people who live there call it home. Both are correct. Now let your breathing slow. Let your muscles release their tension. You're safe in your bed, warm and comfortable, far from frozen outhouses and idling engines and minus 65 degrees Celsius darkness. You've traveled to one of Earth's most extreme inhabited places, witnessed survival at its limits, understood the remarkable adaptability and stubbornness of humans who refuse to let environment dictate possibility. The cold of Yakutia continues, as it has for millions of years, as it will for millions more. The people there continue their daily negotiations with that cold, winning small victories, enduring small defeats, making homes in a place that shouldn't have homes. They persist because persistence is what humans do, even, especially, in impossible places. As you drift into sleep, carry with you not the cold but the warmth. The tea always ready, the banya's steam, the family gathered around a table, the community supporting each other, the defiant pride of enduring. These are the human responses to inhuman conditions, the light we create when darkness is long, the warmth we share when cold is total. Sleep now deeply and peacefully. Dream of ice sculptures glowing in streetlights, of steam rising from heating pipes into frozen air, of a city on stilts maintaining its impossible presence at the edge of the habitable world. Dream of the strength it takes to stay, the courage to endure, the community that makes endurance bearable. And when you wake tomorrow warm and comfortable, perhaps you'll think of those nearly 1 million souls in Yakutsk, starting their day with window scraping and boot grass changing and the eternal question of the outhouse, and you'll feel gratitude for your own warmth, your own ease, your own life that doesn't require constant negotiation with the killing cold. The stories of extreme places remind us what humans can endure, what we can adapt to, what we can make home despite all rational objection. Yakutia stands as testament to stubbornness, adaptability, and the refusal to let environment have the final word. Rest now. Let the frozen wastes exist without you. Let the outhouse crisis remain unsolved for another night. Let the cold be someone else's challenge while you sink into soft, warm, comfortable sleep. Sweet dreams, traveler. You've survived Yakutia, at least in story. That's enough for anyone.